Yesterday.
Where-
I saw it this morning, if you haven't been off to.
Every day.
Yeah.
Checks on them. They fall out or something.
It is just
They've been
after,
there for 3 years. Yeah,
Where?
one of those great big. They don't miss.
all right. Shall we get started? It's just after 6 o'clock. We are recording. Looks like we have Jason on now. Jay, you're gonna have to tell me what you prefer because I always mix it up since it says Jason right in front of me. Do you prefer Jay or Jason?
Well, my mom named me Jason and she hates that I go by Jay, but you call me, let me just rename it. I go by Jay, and if you want to act like my mom, call me Jason.
Well, we'll try to remember that. I'll try to remember that and refer to you as Jay. That's how I've always known you. But then your sign on always says Jason, and that's what I'm staring at. So I tend to call you that. Let's go ahead and get started. We have two primary paths for our work session today. So first, we have some prep just ahead of our general session tonight. We've got a few items. I just want to review those quickly, and then we'll use the balance of our time to continue the work we've been doing that Jake's been facilitating on the general plan. So if we're okay doing that, I'm getting an echo, but I don't know if it's okay. Maybe it's because I'm right in the middle. Tonight, so we've got two sessions worth of minutes to approve. So we'll be going through those minutes. Just be ready to make a recommendation to accept those minutes, or if there's any revisions. So I'm not going to go through those now, but hopefully you've had a chance to review them. And then we have essentially two administrative items. I'm combining one because it's related, but I won't combine it on when we go through it. The first one is the historic overlay zone review of the Vallis Hotel. This is on Commercial Street. It's in the overlay zone. We have been given in our packet all the details, the color palettes, the renderings, the architectural drawings of what they want this to look like. Well, I'll just pause there. Are there any questions, regarding what the being asked there prior to, anything we need to discuss before going into our general session later?
Yes, on item 4 on the agenda.
The additional,
Oh, you are out of order, but yes, go ahead.
no, I'm saying the item 4, the discussion on this additional accessory dwelling units, like we're gonna be talking about that in the workshop. So what kind of discussion are we gonna have in that item? Like in addition to what we cover in the
As
workshop?
far as in the general session, I don't know what the plan was as far as moving that from the work session in the general session.
Do you want me to answer that,
Yeah, go
Chair? So we have a resident of Morgan City who would like to build an accessory dwelling unit that's not compatible with the city ordinance. And he's requested that. And so we're bringing it forward as a discussion item. And yes, they're related, but one is, do we want it in the general plan, which is maybe a little bit longer out? And then the second is, hey, people want to be doing them. Maybe they already are illegally. Should we go ahead and get an ordinance going for accessory dwelling units? And how it would, I mean, we'll get into this, but how it would work is just discussing it, the planning commission could say, we agree with the idea. We want to request that the city council request that an ordinance be created for it. I mean, planning commission could go ahead and ask for ordinance, then we get to city council and say, no, we don't want that. And we wasted time, or they could ask the city council to request it, and then it moves up the pipeline.
That answer your question. Okay. So with respect to this first item, then I don't see a lot here that feels controversial or out of line with the principle and letter or spirit of the law with respect to the historic overlay zone. Everything looked, I didn't double check every color. But you know, we can save any minutia discussion if you want, but otherwise, I didn't see anything here that I was concerned about. Do you have concerns that you want to clarify?
Just for clarification, the applicant had indicated the main color there is not that chartreuse that was in your packet, is actually this Hubbard squash. This is a Sherwin-Williams website, so I just wanted you to see. So when we get into that, that's the color, and that'll be the main portion of the building. And then they can just tell you why they wanted it, but I wanted you guys to see it before.
What was it originally? that they
It
wanted?
was a chartreuse, it was
Or yellow.
yellow.
So this is wrong in the packet, or they submitted it wrong?
They submitted it with that as far as their engineer, but the applicant says that's not the color we wanted. It's
Okay.
this one. And so the applicant sent this saying, please let them know it's this color and not the other one.
Sure.
And it's kind of like the big picture architectural rendering is close. Yet this fine detail, which only the historic overlay requires, and that's coming forward.
You have a thought? You always have a thought. I can tell it's churning.
We dive in.
Just before we dive in, conditional use. So it's kind of the same idea. Is there any pre-discussion that anyone here would like to entertain with respect to the two conditional use permits being requested for, I forget the name of the company, Outdoor or Innovative Solutions, which is where the old Schumacher building used to be. Remember that, Schumacher? So that's on that site. And one of them's for outdoor storage. Well, they're both for outdoor storage. One's on their own property and one is on leased property. So that's the reason for the two different permits. Again, as I looked at that, it felt straightforward. Conditional use permits in general are, it's kind of it's assumed approved unless can't find, unless there's a nuisance that can't be mitigated, kind of a thing. And so that was kind of what I was looking for, is this is create, in the packet, it talked about wind litter. If it's not fenced in, it talked about putting up a fence potentially to help with some of that noise from a forklift, those kinds of things. It is in an industrial zone. Those things all feel appropriate for the zone and mitigatable. So I'm just, if there's any other thoughts on that before we jump into this other discussion.
Part of the big question tonight is, are we going to require fencing around the whole property? That's part of the question you got to decide tonight.
That's in there.
I know it
Part of
is.
the
So
discussion.
part of the thing we've got to decide is whether you're going to require them to fence or not.
And it is a requirement of the ordinance. So we'll get there.
So now if that's the screws ready to require fences, part of that is the material. I don't think that, I don't know how many have driven by that in the last 2 or 3 days. But they've got it stacked 20 feet in the air.
What
This
is
says-
what is it?
Yeah. Well, they got two things down there. If you have your packet.
Go ahead.
They've got finished wall products sitting out there. And then they've got new styrofoam material to go into the shop to make their panels out. Couple scenarios is, yeah, they should have a fence. We never required it before. So that's something we're gonna put on tonight. You wanna require a fence? If so, you let them know it needs to be high enough to hide all their stuff, so they can go whatever high fence they want. Unless this group wants to do something different with that. The couple things that you happen to pass, as you're aware, potentially, we've had a little bit of wind that's blown their raw product. That's caused 2 power outages and scattered around. So the question is, how do we want to request they deal with that? I thought their write-up was pretty weak as how they were going to solve it. You know, if it's costing money to lose product, I think there's ways to solve that. They haven't at least indicated here. There's so ways I think they could solve that. So I don't know if we're going to address that or not, keeping the product on their property or not.
Yeah, that's in the.
Yeah, that's. I don't think commission looked at that or not. It's here, yes. But I think the commission needs to talk about that and think about that. What you're willing to require them to keep it on their own property. What are you going to require on fencing? And then this also requires a right of way. Or at least you'd like to request a right of way down the side towards the railroad tracks, 4-foot right of way for us to eventually put that road in. That's another piece to this. If you're going to consider that. All right, those are the pieces we need to address.
I'll get to the right of way as part of the discussion. But that'll be a requirement at the building permit level. We can't require it at the conditional use permit, but the city can require it for building permits and development, which is coming. But again, we'll get to that as part of the.
And
Yeah.
just to, yeah, just to let you know that there was a conditional use permit was granted. It usually stays with the land. So there was a outdoor storage conditional use permit already on this lot. It was a much smaller area and it was fenced, et cetera. But then in light of this new company coming in and having a massive amount of additional product, they're no longer complying with the original conditional use permit. So that's why they're coming back to planning commission is to revisit that conditional use permit, to modify it to actually house the operation that is now current. And just to let you know, this is now encompassing 2 parcels. The gentleman owns the parcel to the north. And then the additional temporary is another, someone else's parcel. The original permitted use, conditional use permit was with Pro Polymers, which was a plastic recycling company. Correctly. Yeah, they originally were housing all of their plastics inside and then they moved it outside, which outdoor storage is a conditional use permit. So they came to the planning commission with an application, was granted with certain conditions, and then that's then the planning commission worked with them to get the fencing in and the storage.
They don't have a lot of garbage spread around that they take care of the product. It's just a matter of new big sheets of plywood from coming in and their finished wall products. The other question I have on this, the lot they're renting. Are we going to insist they put a fence around that property they're renting with the same requirements
It's
we have?
also in the packet in this.
Yeah, it's in the packet, I know. I thought that's part of the discuss what's in the packet rather than.
Well, I think it's more appropriate to do those discussions when it's in the,
In the regular meeting, okay. I'll quit talking now. I'll say it's the regular meeting.
I guess the one clarifying question with that, and, you know, historically, we've done a lot of those discussions in the work session as well. But my, losing my train of thought here.
While you're thinking, my bad, the work session was to sort out in our minds all the details. And then we got the meeting, give you time to think about what you're going to act on. That was the purpose of the work session from my perspective. So I apologize if that position's changed.
these ones were scheduled for the general plan. But I'm not saying that's not opposed. I'm just saying specifically to get through the general plan. Good questions.
I still don't remember.
There's, in my mind, there's some hard questions here. We require of the applicant. Are you ready to do that?
Well, I think so. And now I remember where it's going with this. Some of it's administrative from the standpoint of if the ordinance requires outdoor storage has to have a fence. There's no discussion on that. That's a requirement that has to happen, whether it's their leased property or not, as I understand it. And so those can be part of the conversation that we'll have. But I want to be clear that these mitigating factors, that there may be some that we can influence and others are already written into the ordinance. So we just be cognizant of that. Ray, thank you for bringing those up though. Any other final thoughts before we spend the rest of our time jumping into the general plan?
One thing real quick, and to do with this, it talks about materials are no higher than the installed fence. I understand that's part of our code. And this is more, I don't know if this is the right time or where this comes from. Is that something we need to look at as manufacturing potentially grows in the city, moves on? Is 6 feet of material enough? If you back in and have something sitting on a flatbed trailer overnight, you're violating your conditional use permit on the semi trailer. It's interesting, different businesses. Teresa and I talked about this. Say you had a lumber yard, they're storing lumber that can be stacked higher than that. Well, then say they were making trusses, then all of a sudden they're manufacturing, it drops, they can't store over 6 feet. A brick yard, something heavy like that, you can't stack that height, the way it would destroy itself. This stuff's really lightweight. I think I think you could probably safely, there needs to be some things figured out on how they secure it and whatnot, but I don't know it may be worth looking at our code. Is that blanket 6 foot enough? Is that we may be turning away some manufacturing or something in the future? I don't know. So just, I guess, for a future discussion on, is that enough?
Kind of feels like you're talking less about the 6 foot and more about, is it fully contained within that 6 feet or covered from sight by that 6 foot?
Well, and I've been through a lot of manufacturing places and all that. You may be able to see what they're doing from the road. So I guess it's a part of what we picture our town. Are we okay with a company that's maybe loads a semi trailer and it's 12 feet tall overnight, that's okay for them to do, or that just puts them in violation of their conditional use permit? So I don't know. I just wonder if the 6 feet for material storage in an industrial area is enough. So future thing, that's to do with the code and not really to do with this. So
I talked with Steve about that and I do have a response.
They're piece similar to that. They propose a pole barn. I don't know how tall that's gonna be. Open pole barn to store the material inside that. The material always to be taller than a 6-foot fence. It could be 30 feet in the air for that pole barn, so you'd be able to see their product in the pole barn, so. That falls on with land.
And it's not an enclosed, just a roof on top.
Well, would that still qualify as outdoor storage then, just because it's got a
That's a good
roof, got a
question.
roof over it, but it's not fully enclosed?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry for being late. We're
Glad.
talking about the storage.
Glad to have you. Yes.
Has anybody brought up, like on the docks? They have like a big mesh. They cover things with. Just to secure. And like you can get them for the bed of your pickup kind of a thing. I mean,
That has not come up.
That's great.
I just thinking, I mean. A structure with a roof on it, but open sides for easy access for them. You're still a big blast windstorm or something. From what I can see and talk to Teresa, it still. You risk the chance of just breaking them apart and they fly out of there. But they are thinking, why don't we suggest to them just those keeping down on the docks somewhere and they just either they're on the barges or on land and they cover them with them big mesh covers that's just maybe 10-inch squares or whatever and stretched down and hooks down and I don't know, just a thought.
One of the recommendations also in the report is the planning commission could require temporary securing in the event of a windstorm. So we put that in there too.
Who's gonna predict when the windstorm?
That's their job. The planning commission will call them.
Seems like a nice idea. Very difficult to enforce.
Sometimes, the big storms, I feel like I've been properly warned the last few years. I get a lot of them on the other side of the mountain. And so, yeah.
We're going to spend a lot of our general session going through more of those details and probably spend the rest of our working session going into the general plan work that we've been doing. Let's do that now. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I want to give you an update on transportation. That was what we discussed last month. We've made some progress since then. Last week, we met with UDOT, the mayor, Ty, myself, and Lance. And our purpose was to request help with funding a corridor study going from east of the interchange, 600 East, through State Street out onto Young, kind of that corridor. UDOT was great to work with. They said, we're thinking even bigger. They want to help us with the transportation master plan. They say, it would be a transportation master plan update, but really it's a very detailed kind of UDOT level transportation. So we're going to meet again next week and figure out the grants, and we're going to get in that process. And part of the reason for that big picture plan is to address all the transportation items. We've talked about what's going to happen with the frontage road and the other bridge on the east side. What about the new development if it happens in the dairy area? Do we need a second one interchange 20 or 30 years down the road? Where can that be? What about the bridge height being 14 feet, 3 inches? The blind curve coming off on commercial. We went over all these issues and we went over other issues in the city, and they said, okay, you need a really comprehensive one where they can spend some time on designing, have experts that know interchanges, freeways, railroad, bridges and crossings, pedestrian crossings, all of that. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. We're pursuing that. And so with UDOT's help, we would have additional money to hire a really good transportation team to dive into those issues. And UDOT would support it and participate in that process as well, which is what we want. We want them to buy into whatever the solutions would come out. And that's something, a transportation plan is adopted by the city. So that would go through the planning commission, just like the general plan, and also would be an adopted plan by the city council and replace the current one. Can we get to it next year? Hopefully, but that'll depend on grant funding, which we're working on.
So were you kind of surprised with the willingness to support us?
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, we met with Region 1 Director, Rob White, and also the planning, the Region 1 planner, Chris Chestnut, and he's helping us to shepherd this through. Mayor, do you have any additional comments on that?
I was quite pleased with the reception of the ideas we presented. And my experience, not experience, but I've been told that I'll pretty much have 10 toes up by the time something happens. 6 foot under the ground, but they seemed really good. And the study, I think, is going to be top notch with some of the ideas that we have, both the planning commission and the city council. So, yeah, I felt real good about it.
And part of our request was we want to understand what lands or areas should not be overzoned to commercial or development when we may need those for transportation. Are there certain areas of the city that we would record at putting significant development, knowing that we need a road here or a bridge there, or whatever it may be? I bring up the Bangerter example, UDOT's buying commercial 3-4 story buildings to put in interchanges on Bangerter, and that's what we don't want. So anything else on that before we jump into housing?
How does that affect like the approval of our general plan timeline wise?
It'll come after, and you can always do a general plan update. We just maybe want to be cautious on areas that at least we think we know now. But we can't wait for that. However, the state law does require general plan updates with a water use and conservation element by 2025. So you're going to be seeing the general plan back sooner than typical in terms of adding that chapter. So you can always fix other things while you're going about it.
So Jake, can I just ask, they initiated that last email to us, correct? That wasn't.
Yes, that is correct.
So that they was requesting another meeting to talk about it. So
Yeah, I think they want to get us into the
it's a good sign.
shoots, since I was talking about the rodeo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
If I can just add to that real quick, I think the Region 1 Director, I don't think as he was looking at the interchange, the off ramps, on ramps, I don't think he had any idea that it is what it is. It didn't take him long. I think you first suggested a corridor study, and they brought up, no, we need to go broader than that. We need a whole area. So it was really good to see their willingness, and I don't think they realized what we have here. So it was good.
I have some mixed thoughts on that. I love the idea that it seemed well received. I'm wondering, sometimes, when the scope gets broadened like that, it can be a good thing on the one hand, so it's more comprehensive, but on the other hand, it can slow down a project or action. I'm wondering if there can be two phases. Somehow that one's maybe more the here and now, something's got to be done, but it fits in with this bigger piece that's still being worked out. And I realize sometimes you have to know what that end goal is before you can do the immediate. So there's some challenges, but I'd like it to not just be conceptual for the next decade. It'd be great if we could somehow accelerate something in the nearer term, and even in the general plan, if it means, part of that land around the interchange area needs to be kind of earmarked for, interchange accessibility. I don't know.
I think that's a great idea. I think we should look at the future land use and maybe figure out what's the right zoning to, not zoning, but future land use around the interchange. We could add an overlay and just something to be cautious about. In the transportation plan, we could request and work with the team so that they give us short-term goals and actions and long-term, what are things that are cost millions of dollars and what are other sidewalks and, little things that the city can be continuing to pursue. And anything that we've learned so far, I want to put in the transportation plan, because I feel like just last time we didn't have we want to get the current transportation plan roads in there, connecting certain roads, the river road. There's a lot of things I think that this group identified that we put on the document that we can add. So we're not, any good ideas are going in it now. And then when we get in that, they'll be short-term and long-term.
Jake, are we thinking about, maybe tracks coming this direction? Cause in Layton, I watched that take place there and it's okay, but it's kind of shoved down there on the south end of Main Street right there. And the parking and everything have you seen anything that they're talking like maybe Trax is gonna run this way?
Well, you're
Up this
fixing
way.
up the rail station, right? The train
There you go,
station.
yeah.
The WFRC regional plan and does not have any transit coming up here. I think the most likelihood would be a bus rapid transit, and they would just use the freeway. I think a bus up here, just like buses go into Ogden Valley, up to Powder, Snow Basin. That's maybe an option. Maybe there's a Wasatch back loop. There's a reason to tie Park City through to Ogden. Those are all fairly long-term though. But maybe the transportation plan could study the need of that. And what you would do, this is what I did with Heber City, is because they had those same questions as well. And Heber's probably closer to that need, but it was all about bus, just identifying where could a bus station be somewhere central and that type of thing.
Because that meeting we sat in, and I can't remember the folks that's doing the general plan, and I was surprised when they said that Morgan County, Morgan City is growing 20% behind the estimated rate of growth here. And then everybody kind of feels like, oh, it's growing really fast. But those folks said, no, the contrary. It looks like that we're going to go and then all of a sudden, look out. We're going to get caught up in a short period of time. That's why I'm asking about tracks and stuff like that. If that general plan would ever, be that involved in that.
Yeah. That's
didn't-
kind of at the regional transportation plan level.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's jump into housing.
So just a quick question. Has there been any, speaking of transportation plan, has there been any discussion or talk about reopening that off ramp that used to be years ago? And I mentioned the off ramp come off over by the hitching post, for those of you who don't remember. And the only reason I bring that up is that if certain things happen, there's going to be quite a lot of growth on that southeast end of town. You have the golf course, if this thing with Como goes through, the fairgrounds, of course, they're the bus state. Is there any validity in looking at that off ramp being reopened?
It was in that discussion.
Yeah, it was in the UDOT discussion.
Because to me, that wouldn't be a terribly expensive fix.
UDOT doesn't like it from safety,
They
just,
don't like the bend, they don't like the curve in the.
and also off ramps being too close together, or certainly it couldn't be a full interchange. Could it be a frontage road and a second off ramp? maybe, I don't know. They didn't like, that's outside of the rule book. Let's just say that. But
Until you talk about how close the exits and on-ramps are. like, on the mountain,
Yeah, what, yeah.
and how much more traffic they have, which we brought up, and then kind of said, yeah.
that's where we would dive, that transportation plan is where we dive into that. And I think that the general plan is the place to identify the issues. So let's get through this plan without saying transportation needs to address these things, and that's one of them. Growth in the southeast, frontage road. What's the other bridge called?
River Kwai. No,
Daughter, is that what it's called? The second bridge? Is it Young Bridge?
what,
By the high school.
our
Yeah.
new one, our new one?
Oh, that
Young
one's
Street?
Young Street. Okay.
That's about all the bridges we.
Okay. Anything else? Jump into housing? Okay, well, did you have a chance to look at the goals? Well, there's just one goal here on housing. I'm gonna zoom in. Here we go. So the written goal is provide a variety of housing opportunities for natural, local growth and life cycle transitions while maintaining agricultural and open space. And then this is what I'll just say this is what my comment was on it. Provide a variety of housing opportunities and types for various ages and incomes, encourage infill development. And then a second sentence, housing should be compatible with small town fill. I don't know that it's Morgan City's job to maintain agricultural and open space, that it's in the county. You have some in the city, but it's really in the county. I think that they're thinking big here of development in the city, less in the county. However, I don't my opinion is I don't necessarily see that as a goal as part of the housing, but just throwing an idea out. What do you think? What do you like or not like about this goal? Do you want to leave it, change it? And then some of these policies that go with it.
But from my standpoint, the word variety is the one that I'm most interested in. What is the scope of that variety? In other words, one of the things that's on here tonight is accessory dwelling units. I realize it's related but separate because of the specific applicant or concerned citizen. But from when I look at this, I'm thinking short-term rentals, mother-in-law apartments, the accessory dwelling kind of things, or even how every as density can change and even double to some extent, can a single family residential have basically a commercial hookup for a mobile home, and someone can rent space next to them as long as they're set back and basically live on the same property. To me, all those fall under variety. Mixed use and lofts above commercial, all of that. So I'm curious, as you were thinking about this, in conjunction with the conversations that have been had, how that's being thought about in application.
Are you seeing variety as a good thing?
Oh, I think it's a great
Okay,
thing. Yeah,
okay.
I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I see, and I hit on variety of opportunities and types, meaning actual building structures, ages and incomes, so that we don't necessarily, a single family home is fantastic if you're, in middle age, but there may be housing for seniors that it's not compatible, stairs, assisted living, any of that, main floor living. And that's why I put in ages and incomes, and incomes meaning that we have high-end housing, and then we have attainable housing. Attainable is kind of middle income housing, and then low income as well, having a variety of that. And then the encourage infill part was my getting at of That's how Morgan City can help open space and agriculture, is by focusing on infill and less on sprawl. And then the compatible with small town is kind of a qualifier, saying, yes, we want to have a variety, but this is a Morgan City scale, not a Ogden or South Jordan or Draper scale.
I would agree with what you're going for there on the types of various ages and incomes. Very important on infill. Yes, I agree with you on the agriculture and open space. Like we don't have the space. That's not really, it's a county issue. And so I would agree with changing that. I get what you're saying on the small town feel. It's a pretty, I think that's subjective, right?
It is subjective,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
And that's fine.
It's a goal, it's a vision idea. Could be small city. It's a little bit of a safety belt kind of thing for the public. So you don't say mixed use in there, somebody wants to build a skyscraper.
We can't build skyscrapers, right? We don't have a fire truck tall enough.
That's true.
This plan though is still a 3x3 square mile city.
Yep.
3x3. 7 miles by 10 miles. So it's pretty small.
So I would agree, changing that open space and agriculture part.
Okay.
I would agree with
You
that.
want to pull out the compatible with small town feel?
I think I like where you're going. I'm trying to think of if there's another way to say that.
That could come back to her. It could be, people could be like, well, we don't want to grow at all. We're small town. What is small town? Is that Hennifer or is that Morgan City?
You look at your 1-2L survey, what is the overriding comment? We want a rural atmosphere, we want a small town. It's, it's something.
Do we have any type of PR messaging to help with that? Because I don't know that I love the constraint. And by the way, I'm not looking for a big inner city type of environment either. But because it is so subjective, this small town feel, it feels like we could get a lot of people, potentially using that as their rallying cry. Well, this is, this project's in violation of what's in the general plan, and is it?
We could just take it out.
Well,
I'm not opposed to that.
I get the PR side of it. I understand that. It just feels like a constraint that we don't need. We're just not going, we're not growing even when this boom comes. There's limitations with the square, mileage of the city and what we can actually do. And you made a comment, I think it was you last time, where you said, I don't want to be the one to kind of, it's not going to be popular, but the reality is we need to grow and it's going to change some of the way that this feels or that feels. I think it was you. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but the concept being, and what I believe is all healthy things grow. And if you're not growing and you're not doing that with a plan, then who was it that said then you just turn into a city where you've got old farm equipment as art sitting out everywhere? And that's not what I think of. I think of a small town. That's what I think of when I think of a dumpy town. So I don't want that either, right? So
Well,
Let me just offer another perspective, because I didn't grow up here in Morgan like you did, Nate. I grew up in California, and the beautiful, idyllic, agricultural Central California town of my childhood no longer exists. And so I've seen growth go wrong, and I don't want to see that. I'd like to see Morgan maintain their small town feel. This is subjective, but I think because of that, it gives us a little bit of flexibility. We can bend it either direction as we need to. So I vote for keeping some reference to the small town.
it could be a small city. I mean, it is a city.
One of the issues that I have is people are complaining about property taxes going up. And, we don't have enough commercial thing to help offset the property taxes. So it's a kind of a catch 22. Can you have a totally small town environment without the support of some growth commercially? Because, the taxes are gonna keep going through the roof because the only one bearing the burden are the residents and none of the businesses. So that's one of the issues I see. It's, the small town thing is great. And I grew up here and I wanted to stay that way, but I think you mentioned that, some growth has got to be good, and especially commercial growth to help offset taxes.
But again, that's commercial growth, not housing. So how do we kind of address that within this?
Part of your focus though is on quality, not
Yeah, very
necessarily
true.
how big we grow, what's the quality?
Yes.
And maybe that's, we replace the sentence with something focused on quality.
Something
I don't know, I
like
put small town quality, but just
Do some wordsmithing there
some
to
more on
suggest that.
quality.
That's why
Yeah.
I'm thinking I want that PR language. It's not that I'm opposed to the concept. I just don't want that to be a constraint.
Well, As
It feels like that could be ammunition for every new project that comes in.
It could.
And yet, this would make the residents happier. So who do we want to make happy, the residents or the developers?
I'll tell you this, the residents come out when there's a project proposed, not when there's a general plan.
That's true.
So here's
But we're
my
gonna-
question. We've had this before over and over again. We make suggestions, which is awesome. But the last meeting I was to, and it was the Nye brothers, and they purchased the land, they paid for a concept drawing, and dang it, it's really not what we'd like to see. But we're behind. It's like being put in the game in the fourth quarter, and you're down 25 points and the coach tells you, go get them, and you're just like, great, I don't know what I'm gonna do now. And it seems like, and this is just my feelings, we're behind every time. And I think most people would like what we're talking about here. I know I love living here. I'm not gonna move. And people have raised here and move in here and we love it. But every time a new project comes, if we don't like the project, all we can say is, man, we really don't like that project, but it's zoned that way. And gosh, what are we gonna do on the next project? And so I'm just confused about what purpose does these things have? They sound good. But when the developer comes in to do it, they're gonna look at brass tacks on the paper and say, it's zoned this, I can get away with this. And yeah, I know you guys want it to stay like Morgan, and maybe the next project we'll do it for you on the next one. But for right now, we're gonna put as many homes in here as we can possibly get because we're gonna make the most amount of money out of it. So I'm not being ornery. I'm just trying to figure out how do we get in front of these projects instead of behind the projects.
And I'm glad you brought that up. And what I'd like to do is add a fifth policy that focuses on developing ordinances that produce quality development. Because you look at these policies here, we have expand zoning to allow for higher density, mixed use. So that's just saying, more housing, more mixed use in the center, resolve infrastructure limitations. You do have that. Accessory dwelling units, number 4 in here, and then allow and encourage new residential development that meets the future community needs. Maybe we could put that into 4, but I'm not seeing let's get ahead of the game and put in the ordinances that require the standards that require development we're happy with. Because when you have that game plan, then when the developer shows up, they have to follow it.
Nate brought up something just a minute ago. PR. That when the first time the developer comes, and I think last meeting you brought it up, that let's sit down with these guys prior and say, hey, you know what? here's A, B, and C options, and we love A. I know you can put C in if you'd like, but get them an idea of what this group and a lot of citizens would like. And then most people will go, okay, I can make sense out of it. I can make money doing it. And I'm gonna like get a gold star on my paper from Morgan City because we get along. And it's kind of like get it started somewhere, you know?
So, Mr. Chair, can I make a comment?
Please do.
And Jake, you can help me with this. We're talking about some kind of sit down with developers with all of our city staff. So the water, sewer, such and such, and come up with a more of a plan design instead of the code says you can do this, and if it's flat land and you can have 15 houses on an acre if it's flat, you know, but more have more of an input for that developer to show him what the city footprint would like to be. Isn't that kind of what we're hoping
Yeah.
for?
Yes, I do want to say that the best thing a city can do is have what you want in the code.
You have to change the code to allow it.
Yeah, change the code allow, and then in addition, that's more coaching and working with the developers.
Code and ordinance.
But to Wes's point, though, I think that is this discussion. You know, this isn't just conceptual and being reactive. We're trying to translate all these ideas, these visions into, you know, a general plan that we all feel good about. And then, as far as I understand, the next step then is to align our ordinances so they're more in line with the general plan. And then when those projects come in, the ordinances they're complying with are compatible with our vision instead of incompatible. Now, it's not a quick process. We're still talking, it's going to take a while. And we're going to have stuff come through. But as I understand it, that's the point of this.
Mr. Chair, so, and Jake, on this, I agree. I think you're right on with trying to get to where things encourage the right thing. And if you want to put more policies in place, I know we're getting short on time. One thing here, I serve another role as the destination marketing person for the county.
Oh.
And when you get into these policies of policy 1, policy 2, this is an interesting one. So here's
For economic,
it's separate, but yes.
so that's another day.
Well,
Or are you saying here on
No,
this
no.
side,
So
the
right-
higher
right-
density?
no, sorry, it is on the economic development side. I'm sorry. Yes. We're just only on this side.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were just on the same page, if that's
Okay.
okay.
There is another thought too, though, because there's natural interrelations with these, and Aaron, you'd brought up commercial, and you know, we're talking about residential, but one of the challenges that we're having, the commercial has a short shelf life, it seems, here in town, and a lot of people try it and then it doesn't work out, and you need that residential base to support that commercial. And so I don't think we can talk about one without the other. In my mind, we have to build, we have to build some type of growth strategy into this general plan so that the commercial side of it is viable.
And as crappy as it is in business, you kind of let in the devil so the angels can get around it, meaning you might have a big business that's a statewide, nationwide, something business. And what happens is, as their success grows, businesses will move around them and thrive off of that. I read one note, I read that Walton's book, and he said in there, the only thing I can hardly remember, he says, don't hate me. He says, move next to me and do something that I don't do and capture all of that business. I thought, Okay, that makes sense. And that's exactly what I did with my business. Is I got just traffic, free eyeballs and close, and I do something that Walmart doesn't do. And so sometimes in this vision of the city, you know, we don't like these big nationwide companies sometimes. But sometimes you have one of them and then businesses, small mom and pops can move next to them and thrive. Whereas if that business isn't there, people go into it and then they go, well, let's go over to Nate's and try that. I mean, nature, the beast kind of a little bit.
We need to wrap up our work session.
Two quick statements. Policy 1D. May correct me, Teresa or Lance. R18 is on our is on our schedule, but I don't think we allow it in our code. So the code that we changed to put R18s in.
Oh, yeah.
R110 is the smallest we go currently.
Yep.
That's a situation at least to discuss or
Thanks
understand.
for bringing that to my attention.
Policy 4A, the word conservation subdivision is used several times. I'm not sure what that is, or if that's even applicable within Morgan City. The conservation subdivision. 4A.
The idea is like, if you had a 20-acre,
If that's the concept, you don't have that.
a 10-acre subdivision, and maybe the properties are too small. If you had a 10-acre subdivision and you said, we'll give you a bonus density that instead of doing a 1/4 acre lots, you can do 1/5 of an acre lots. And then you also preserve 10 or 20% of that. And so you end up with a pasture. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing at a small scale. You just end up with fields and it's not ag producing. I did add a note here for transfer of development rights, that you could consider that as a tool, and I can come back at a future time and show you that. Been working with the Cache Valley City and they're about ready to adopt an ordinance that'll do that. It's Nibley City, if you know where Nibley is. And the idea is they have ag land and they have river land that they want trails, and they also want ag land. And so it'll preserve their boundary around and put density where they want it. I'm suggesting maybe we come back with housing again next time. It's a huge topic. And if the planning commission would like, I'll send you my marked up PDF at a time so that you have all my notes, my thoughts, and then you can disagree with me and each other, and we can have that debate and get to where we need to be.
Can I just make one recommendation? When we do this, I think we get held up on something that's not as important as actually getting into the details here. So we can argue about whether we say small town this or that, but we need to get into the actual policies.
Yes.
And we got to save those other comments. I mean, we all kind of agree generally where we need to be, but we got to get into those. So I'd say either we limit our time on some of the other discussion very quickly, have that out, and get into the actual policies that are going to encourage this stuff that we need to have. So next time, let's do that.
Okay. The beginning and the end of this is really important. The middle is all data. Thank you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful suite.
Those of you just joining us, if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already, go ahead and sign in. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, August 16th, and I want to welcome everyone to our Morgan City Planning Commission meeting. We have this meeting being live broadcast on YouTube and streaming. So just be aware that this is being recorded and streamed as we speak. For those of you joining us from the public, welcome. Thank you for your interest and participation in tonight's meeting. If you haven't already, please make sure that you sign in at the front so we have record of your attendance. We will work through 4 agenda items this evening. Before we get into those agenda items, we have one matter of business to work through, and that's in relation to approval of our minutes from our previous 2 meetings that we've had. So we'll do that now, and hopefully we've had enough time for members of the commission to take some time, review those minutes, and or recommend approval or revisions. So this time I'll call for a motion to that effect.
I make the motion that we approve them as written.
Thank you for that. Any second on that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Let's go ahead and vote. Jay, I'll look for your hand up. All in favor of approving the minutes as outlined currently, please indicate. Unanimous here in the room. Jay, I didn't see your vote. Still not seeing Jay's vote one way or another.
Sorry, I heard a scream. I had to walk out.
Oh, you're
I
good.
didn't hear it. Give me a
It's
chance.
okay. We're approving the minutes as is and looking for your vote as a yay or nay. All right, it's unanimous, Teresa. With that, let's jump into the 4 points of our agenda, and we'll take them in the order as outlined. This first agenda item is in regard to the historic Vallis Hotel located at 177 North Commercial Street. This does fit within the historic overlay zone within the city. And there is a remodel being proposed by the developer. Before we jump in, and I don't know, do we have a representation from the project here? Okay, I'll give you the floor in a moment just to give your context on the project. Before doing that, I'd like Jake to give an overview from a staff perspective, and we'll go to that point.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm gonna pull up my report here. Is that okay, Teresa? Okay. So just a little background. The Vallis Hotel or the property is located at 177 Commercial Street. I don't know if it's going to continue to be called that. That was the name historically. It's in the central commercial zone and also in the historic overlay zone, which has a pertinence to what we'll be discussing tonight. I enjoyed learning a little bit about this hotel, built in 1890. It is part of the historic area of the city. And here it is right here on Commercial Street. You see that on the map there. I brought in some of the text from the historic commercial overlay zone. I wanted to bring this to your attention. The structures and appurtenances within the zone are to maintain the historical appearance of the area, and the exterior remodel, reconstruction, new construction, or modification shall be submitted to the Planning Commission with color renderings of the proposed work. The commission shall review the renderings to ensure compliance with this requirement. The commission is authorized to require architectural consistency regarding design, materials, and the colors of exterior buildings within the zone. Building materials, brick walls in traditional earth tones and in standard sizes dominate the district and contribute to a sense of visual continuity that should be preserved. Cut sandstone was the only rock used during an era. This talks about the historical materials. Simple material finishes and muted color schemes are encouraged. I'll ask if there's any questions from the Planning Commission. And then the ordinance does discuss fenestration in terms of doors and windows. But I don't think we need to go over all that. There is something here on color. Using color schemes that reflect those found on historic buildings is preferred. Color selection shall be reviewed by staff and decisions ratified by the Planning Commission. There is an adopted here with color palette with approved paint colors for use within the districts. That palette shall include those colors illustrated and comparable to the Williamsburg Reserve Collection. I don't have that. I don't know if Teresa does. Entitled Historic Homes. I will say though that I reviewed all of the submitted materials and looked at historic photos and I think it looks good in terms of a historical representation. Of course, nothing is vintage and completely how it used to be. We live in a modern era, but it does reflect that. And Teresa does have the colors pulled up that she can share on the screen. And then we also have a representative of the applicant. Are you the project architect? No. Okay, but so do we have you pull them up? What direction of the Planning Commission? Questions on the ordinance?
Yeah, before we discuss, some of the questions that commission members may have, I'd also like to hear, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. John, I'd like to hear Mr. Patterson's perspective as a representative of the project and what the vision and goal is of what you're hoping to do here.
All right, the vision and goal, it's kind of been a little bit of an uphill battle. The county has worked and they've got the historic district created. When the Vallis was first listed, it was listed as a non-contributing member. I did get it listed as a contributing member because the facade has not changed much. Just with Mr. Young, he's pointed out that the Williamsburg Reserve Collection, that palette is a palette from the 1700s, 1600s, late 1600s, early 1700s. So it's very limited in the palettes we have used are Sherwin-Williams, and it's from their historic palettes, primarily the arts and crafts colors that would be more reflective. The Vallis was originally built in 1890, as Mr. Young noted. It was also extensively remodeled in 1937 by Virgil Stewart. And that remodel took the hoods off the Vallis that you saw in the photo with Mr. Young's presentation. And it's had that modern streamlined look ever since. What we're doing is actually going back to that. For those of you who've been around Morgan long enough, the filming of the Porter Rockwell kind of changed the facade a little bit. And I provided some photographs to Teresa, if she can pull those up. No, it was
Do you know the
Yeah,
date?
I don't remember the date offhand, but anyway, I do have, I did try to provide some photographs that covered the Vallis from approximately the early 1950s through the 1990s. When the Porter Rockwell movie was done, they put a trompe l'oeil over the surface of the Vallis and made it look like it was brick. Underneath that, it is actually just a very smooth stucco texture. So the trompe l'oeil's coming off fairly easily anyway. So all of that's going to be removed. The surface underneath that's cracked, chipped, or loose will be removed and will be fixed. And then the keeping in line with the modern streamlined look from 1937 is how the painting will look. And that was what you're seeing there.
So they were historic photos. The renderings do help. That you have. I think they kind of show that. Obviously, they're not historic photos, but
Yeah,
they get to that idea.
so the glass that you're seeing across the main floor is still there. It's the original glass. The center part above the doors is currently covered over with stucco, and that was filled in for the movie. The clerestory windows behind that are still in there and they're still intact, believe it or not. So that piece of the stucco on the front will come out. Additionally, the building had a double door when it served as Morgan's Theater from 1937 until approximately 1954. And double doors will be going back in into the entrance as well. For years, people said that the hoods that were in the photograph that Mr. Young had in his presentation were took off for the movie. What was removed for the movie was the neon sign for the Vallis. And unfortunately, it was stored by the city and unfortunately was discarded somewhere along the way. So the hoods have been long gone if anybody had any notion that they were still around.
Oh, I think Teresa, that came from Steve Cornell from FFKR. If you just put in Steve Cornell. S. Cornell. Monday this week. I can put it at the top of your email box.
He just forwarded it for you.
If you go back to the inbox, it should be at the top.
Maybe.
I can pull it up. I got it.
While we're pulling this up, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Please do.
So one of the questions, is this gone through the State Historical Society as well?
Yes.
The design and look and feel?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
so this is the photographs. That photograph was taken approximately 1979, and you can see the double doors were still there. The look hasn't, from that photograph to the earlier black and white ones, hasn't changed. So the paint scheme does kind of highlight some of the architectural features with the archway over the main entrances and the pilasters on each side.
Farther away.
Mhm.
That photo is approximately 1933. But that looks long gone.
Yeah. That's where, and this is what you're saying is the historic look
That's the historic look, yeah,
minus the,
minus the sign.
and that sign.
The hotel part isn't going back on. There was another sign on the west side that said cafe that faced the highway. That sign won't be going back up either. We have talked with Allied Sign Company and provided them photographs to try to recreate the sign that Virgil Stewart put on there in the 1930s.
And this is a phone booth in case you've never seen one.
So, not in scope tonight is anything related to the sign. That's a separate.
The sign's a separate, will be a separate deal.
I just want to make sure we're clear in the scope because tonight feels like as far as what's before us is considering the appropriateness of the chosen color palettes, with respect to the ordinance in the overlay zone. A lot of the other remodel work that you're doing behind the scenes. In our work session, we discussed that, some of that's being worked out with staff and doesn't necessarily need to come before the commission. So I want to make sure that we're clear on the scope of what's before us tonight of moving forward with this proposed redevelopment of this project. So what questions do you have as members of the commission for either, for Mr. Patterson that he can help resolve as we discuss this item?
I think if it's okay, Teresa, you were saying that in the packet that we received, the main color for the facade was different.
Going to Hubbard from Chartreuse.
Chartreuse was a little too much Miami and Los Angeles for the modern streamlined era. I couldn't do it. None of us could. We have found underneath the Trompe l'Oeil a cream colored paint, and later it was painted almost a rose color.
So this would be the color that would be on the main parts
Would
of
be
the
the predominant
exterior.
color.
Okay.
Do we have a current picture of the Vallis in the packet? We do scroll to that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Part of it is I'm looking for, the
So
compatibility with the.
So the current view of the Vallis has the Trompe l'Oeil on it, which is incompatible with any historical context of the building because that was added specifically for a movie. And it was actually what was killing the Vallises being included in the historic district originally. So that whole thing that looks like the brick, that's all coming off and going back to the smooth
What's the name of that feature again? That brick?
Trompe l'Oeil.
Yeah.
And for us non-architects,
Yeah. So all of that was added. On the archway, you can see would be your right side where it bends. That's where some of the trompe has come off, and you're looking at the original plaster from the 1930s.
Okay, so you're looking to reopen that window above the door, put in the double doors,
Yep.
keep that smooth facade, pull off the
Yeah. So
Royale.
yeah, and it's made to look like real brick. And if you get a photo from approximate from about 1995, 1998, when that movie was done, it looked a whole lot better. It's faded over the years, but it was just a real thin coat less than 1/8 of an inch over the exterior of the building.
Thank you. Other questions? Discussion items?
I got a question, and I guess it's a rhetorical question. I assume the structural integrity of the building meets all the codes and everything that will meet all the codes required by the city?
The building is structurally sound and, in fact, Mr. Stewart, when he remodeled it in 1937, reinforced the building between the main floor and the second floor with steel beams. And they also, I've got the write-up from the architect in 1937. And it also went into very great detail on the columns too, and reinforcing those. But as part of this project, yes, the city is working with Steve Cornell of FFKR. They're the same company that's doing the railroad station, the architects, and WC3, who's doing the code review on it. So in terms of safety, it'll be far safer than it was.
And just, I may have missed this in the packet, but just a curiosity question, just for my own interest. What is your intention as far as utilizing the building?
So the second and third floor have been apartments primarily since 1979. They will remain apartments. The old theater that was in there, the intent is to use that as event space, kind of like Wolf Creek over in Eden, can do weddings and stuff. The stage is still in there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any planning concerns that any commission members are entertaining or thinking about?
Only in regards to the color scheme being used?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I have no concerns.
For clarification, it is on there were drawings submitted that were in the packet, and it is also for the facade as well. The color is the big thing, but also the materials as well. And the windows and doors.
Can we put the rendering back on of what it is intended to look like once those changes have been made?
Do you have that, Teresa?
And while we're doing that, I'm not seeing
PowerPoint.
a lot of discussion on this or issues that have come forth. And so with respect to that, I just want to clarify the action that we're taking. This action we approved directly within the Planning Commission, so we're not making a recommendation to the City Council. And so as you word your motion, please keep that in mind that we're approving the color scheme, renderings, facade as requested or not, depending on your position. But that's how we'll proceed if someone's ready to either continue the discussion and or let's take some action on this item.
Mr. Chair, I'd be willing to make a motion to approve the facade colors as submitted for the Vallis Hotel with the chartreuse being changed to Hubbard Squash 004.
Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second that.
Mr. Reese, second that. Before we vote, is there any discussion with respect to this motion?
One question again, going back to the state. So you have consulted with the State Historical Society on this building? And they had no questions or concerns on any of the things, I assume?
No,
Okay.
not on this part of it, no.
Any other discussion before we vote? And then Teresa, if you can bring up the Zoom screen so I can see Mr. Ackett. Let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of the motion as outlined, indicate. Any opposed? I think that was unanimous. So thank you, Jay. And Teresa is unanimous. Mr. Patterson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your investment in the city. Appreciate that.
Forward to seeing it. What's the timeline look like? Okay.
As soon as we get that.
Great.
So some of you may know that John also the one that took the bank building and has restored it. But Just, you mentioned Nate, we thank you, John, your family, your cohorts for your investment in our city, what you've done the bank building and the way you've done the quality there. I'm sure the Val's will be a choice piece for us. So thank you, John.
We want a grand opening.
Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item number 2 and then closely followed by agenda item number 3 that's related to the same applicant and adjacent subject properties. The action before us today is to review the conditional use permit for Innovative Solutions located at 375 East, 400 North. And we'll take this one first. There's a lot of similarities between agenda item number 2 and 3. And so some of this discussion may overlap, and we'll refer to each of those as we consider these proposals. With respect to this particular request for this renewal of the conditional use permit, I'd like to have Jake, Mr. Young from the city, provide a staff overview of what's being asked and what some of the considerations are.
Thank you. And in a minute, I'm sure we'll give you a chance to discuss. So as mentioned, the property is located at 375 East, 400 North. That's in the commercial, or that's in the industrial zone, industrial area. The base zoning is manufacturing and distribution. So there's 2 properties together. You see this one on the top screen there. That's the northeast property, and then kind of the south property, the original building and business as well. And the previous, our understanding is that the previous owner and business had a conditional use permit for outdoor storage, and the current owner and applicant has expanded that use, and so it's outside of the physical limits of the previous conditional use, and so there is a need to have a conditional use for outdoor storage. And outdoor storage is allowed in the code as a conditional use. I put in the packet the ordinance. Required enclosures, outdoor storage facilities for junkyards, fuel, and raw materials. Products except for agricultural products shall be enclosed by a fence or a wall at least 6 feet in height and impervious to sight, adequate to conceal such facilities from adjacent property and the street unless expressly exempted elsewhere in this title. No items may be stacked higher than the fence or the wall of the enclosure.
Jake, before you move on, just I want to clarify. Is that the only place in our code where outdoor storage is referenced, or is it referenced in different zones? So this is the outdoor storage ordinance for the industrial zone versus a commercial zone versus, is it the same throughout the ordinance, or is this one iteration of it?
I think this is one iteration. I do want to see if Teresa or Steve have anything in addition on that.
Thank you.
Steve, did you have anything on that?
It's in the definitional section, but I can't remember off the top of my head any more in depth than that. Let me take a look.
Okay. Steve's going to take a look at that.
For example, in the land use classification, commercial land use classification table, number 10.16.160 states, under the industrial and related uses, commercial, outdoor storage is prohibited in commercial general, commercial central, is permitted as a conditional use permit only in both the historic commercial, highway commercial and manufacturing as conditional use permits.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. So ordinance is consistent. Here's a couple photos of the properties. You'll notice there, included in your packet. So we'll give the applicant a chance in a minute to talk about their product and their facility and how they use it. But you'll see there's the outdoor storage on both properties. And as far as I could see, there's just a little bit of a wall fence on site. And then this is a site layout exhibit, more of a schematic that submitted by the applicant's engineer as to the direction they want to go with the property in the future. And this is 400. So 400 North is here and 375 is at the bottom of the screen. And then the right of way on the north is on the side to help you orient it. And existing plant, and then proposal for office, storage building, and then outdoor materials. The application does ask questions about environmental concerns. The applicant has said that there is no liquid waste, and steel and EPS is reused and recycled on site. I'll give them a chance to explain that. My understanding is that over the past couple of years, there have been incidents of material blowing off site and into power lines. So that is a concern. So here's some considerations for the Planning Commission. Does require a fence 6 feet or taller. And then I think for discussion purposes, materials no higher than installed fence. That is in the code. I do have some comments on that later on to discuss that.
There's a question on that fence piece. The code, there's kind of two things at play, right? One is this idea that outdoor storage requires a 6-foot impervious fence. And this is the part I want to clarify. And then that fence also needs to comply with whatever the ordinance number is for fencing generally within the city. Is that accurate? So one is the calling for the fence. The other one is making sure with the fence as constructed complies as well.
Correct. Yeah. And I do want to, this was a discussion I had with Teresa. I think I want to say this is an error in the report, that our understanding is there is not a written agreement on higher storage. So I just want to clarify that for the record. I was misunderstood. I had a misunderstanding previously on that. And then here's just some things that could be conditions. Materials to be kept on site, when blown off, cleaned up within a certain period of time. In case of wind events, tying down materials, securing those. That would be the responsibility of the business to do that. And then also I want to clarify the right of way for the 400 East to continue. That would be not part of the conditional use permit, but actually at the building, at the building step is when that would happen. When the applicant comes in for building plans, that's when the arrangement and agreement on the right of way would happen, but not at the conditional use permit. So I'm also clarifying that. And then other conditions as required by the planning commission.
Do we define, if we scroll back out to where we've quoted the code here, do we define what outdoor storage means as far as, you know, the permanence of it? We're keeping it here overnight, so it's materials in transit, or we're keeping it here long-term for a period of time that then is subject to this, but materials in transit may not be. And I don't know if we've defined it in the code that way. I'm just trying to look and see.
It is not in terms of, but I would say my interpretation, it does allow long-term.
But I guess I'm kind of thinking the other direction for short term, primarily. Lance, you'd mentioned in our working session, you know, if someone comes in with a semi-trailer flatbed and it's being loaded and it's parked overnight, it's going to be over 6 feet, but that's not long-term storage. That's materials in transit. So I'm trying to say, would that situation?
You're asking, is there a distinguishing between dropping off materials and
Correct.
and that, and
You know, in other words, would that activity be a compliance issue or not?
Steve, do you have any comments on that? You know, dropping off material, unloading storage, compared to the ongoing outdoor storage of material?
Yeah, correct. Usually the transportation materials in and of themselves are to and from the site, like inventory, are not considered part of the land use. I mean, you have a lot of exceptions for like semi-truck drivers. Obviously, they can go off the truck route when they're doing the immediate delivery and pickup. And so you have to kind of look at that. I mean, obviously, if they're starting to stack the semis along the roadway, then that becomes an enforcement problem from that standpoint, but not the land use. One thing that can kind of help you when you look at the difference between open storage and outdoor storage is you look in the land use tables and the uses that are in that same category next to them, you know, which kind of makes sense. Like open storage in a retail area means that, you know, like the tire guy can put his tires out front, the furniture people can put the furniture out front, those type of things are allowed. And then you look at the outdoor storage, usually in the industrial and manufacturer setting, it's a little bit more harsh, and that's why the restrictions for mitigating are allowed to basically address the issues that have been discussed tonight with regard to the visibility of them, the fact that they get transported by the winds and those type of issues. And so though they're not specifically defined, obviously that means that they have their common understood definition. But then, like I said, you look at the surrounding uses, what are permitted in that area, and then what else is a conditional use, and that gives you more of a direction on what's contemplated by the code.
Mr. Garside, thank you for the additional context. Before we open it up for deeper discussion, we do have representation from the Innovative Solutions here. Would you mind stepping to the microphone, stating your name and
Sure.
and
Appreciate the opportunity to come today. I just want to ask the question, how many of you have been over to our shop and actually seen what we build and what we do with it? You know, Ray's been over quite a few times. In fact, he's one of the first people that we met when we kind of came to town. This is the product that we make. This is just a sample, and happy to pass them down and look at them. They might say, well, what do you do with that? We build about anything you want, a residential house, a commercial building, an industrial building. And right now, our largest use of our product is by built up construction. So we're building Amazon buildings. We're not, we build a product that goes in the wall. And what this does is it gives the walls, instead of straight concrete, it gives them an insulation that they never had in the past. So now these big buildings that have in the past been energy inefficient are now energy efficient. And so when we moved to Morgan, you know, there's an old saying, you don't know what you don't know till you don't know or till you have to know. And when we came, we started out building residential houses, and our company just grew very slowly. And then we spent a lot of time getting our product tested for industrial buildings, and then we've just gone very, very fast in the amount of growth. When we started out, we had 3 employees, we now have close to 30, and our plan is to add a second shift, and we'll be up in the 40s. And most of those are people from here in Morgan. We also hire a lot of high school kids and give them a job after school, and we don't pay minimum wage. We train them, we pay them a good wage for young people working after school, and then that carries over into the summer. As I said, you know, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you experience it. And some of the things that we've had to deal with is, as I'm sure all of you understand, that there have been times when we could not get our raw goods. A year ago, we placed an order for 1 million pounds of steel, and we almost, and it really hurt our business. And but as it was mentioned in the report, we have no pollution. We use very little water. In fact, we don't use any water in our manufacturing process. The only water we use is restrooms and in the break room and a few things like that. We don't take anything to the landfill up until, and again, trying to deal with a little bit. Some of the waste that we do have, at first we thought, well, it doesn't burn, so we'll try to melt it and melt the foam out, and then we can sell the steel for salvage. And it wouldn't burn. And so we had to put some grease on it to get it actually burning. And of course, we had black smoke in the sky, and fire department came and they okay and all that kind of stuff. And so we realized quickly that, you know what, that's not the best way to go about it. And we tried everything we could think of. And my son Marcus, who's one of the owners of the company, I have 2 sons over there, and a good friend that lives up in Florida. We found an industry for tire setting, and it will actually grind this up and separate the foam and the steel. We can catch the steel with the magnet, and we take the foam and we bale it. And we condense it and we bale it, and it's sold to a company in Logan for picture frames. The steel goes back to the salvage company. And, you know, so at the end of the day, our goal has been nothing goes to the landfill. If there's a way around it, we don't want to do it. Now, part of the discussion, there was a handout. Marcus, would you make sure I'd like you to all have a part of this, because it is a part. We understand that we're a company that's growing, and we need to be good neighbors. We want to be. We contact the people across the street by sending kids out to go pick up anything that has blown away. We've had a few incidents with the foam, not the panel, but just the foam blowing into the power lines a couple of times. So to take care of that, if you look at this, the area that's in the brightest color of yellow, that will act, there's almost 7,000 square feet there. We ordered like a hay barn, for lack of a better term. We're going to have a roof over that area, and we'll be able to stack all of our foam needs under that roof. Raw material, and it's EPS. It's not extruded, it's expanded.
But define EPS for me, please.
Expanded polystyrene.
Okay,
And
that's what that is. Okay.
Now, there are many different types of that. There's expanded, there's extruded, and there's one that's called polyiso. And we will never use polyiso because that actually gives off nitrogen when it's disturbed. Okay, and you know, I've been involved in this industry for almost 20 years. I grew up in the southern part of the state, in a little small town called Loa. And I've been in the building industry for almost my whole life. And we found this product back in, we were there for quite a few years, and I decided we wanted to come home to Utah. Because everything we were building was going out. And so getting here, it's very important to me that we protect our environment, that we don't pollute, we don't cause trash and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as we started seeing that we were having some issues with the foam blowing, we started scrapping it. And trying to scrap foam was like trying to herd cats. It just, the wind blows this way, blows it that way, blows it up because it's so light. So we tried scrapping it, and we continue to scrap it every day. Send the kids out and say, at the end of the day, go out and pull scraps over the phone in case we have wind. You know, it's getting better, but it doesn't meet my terms. And so we're going to put a roof over that. And when you put that under a roof like that, and it confines it enough, the wind can't blow it from the middle. It's taking it off the top. And the way it does that is when our vendors bring the foam, they put 1 or 2 wraps of plastic film around it. And it's not enough. And I've asked them to put more and more, but there's times that the wind will pick up one piece and then it loosens the plastic. We get a second and a third. But when we get it under the roof and we're able to stack it in there tight like we do, we'll end this. And if it doesn't end with just the roof, we can put up, you know, some poles. Which will still give us the ability to lift that post away and have access to the foam to go around the side of the building, down that driveway over there, and into our existing building and then the new building that's on the back. And we're right in the process of that new building. It's kind of a red pink. There we have our structural drawings, and we're just finishing up the architectural drawings, and we'll be bringing them for permit and for review. And we'll be working with WC3 on this, and we're going to build that building with our product as a build-up. And so, you know, it's our product. It's a great product, and we believe in it. And like if we didn't, you know, we wouldn't be much of a company in doing that. Now, along with that, there's a lighter yellow part out there by the red building.
So just before you move on,
Yeah.
if I may, so far you've only been talking about this yellow section, the darker yellow section.
Right.
You're putting up that barn rooftop, but then putting up sides with your product. So it'll be fully enclosed,
No, not the yellow.
not the yellow.
The
Okay.
yellow will have a roof,
Okay.
and then the sides, we've got to be able to get in there to get the phone.
Sure.
So they would be open, but we would, if
Except for-
necessary.
So except for the side against the building and the side against the road.
Right,
That way,
that would be
there'll
close.
be 2 sides open and 2 sides enclosed. so
Got
that
it.
way The wind can't come through and take it out.
Okay.
Because right now, the way the wind blows, it blows over the building, comes up and picks it off. But when you turn it, that way it can't do it. And then it never comes through the other direction enough to actually push it. So
Okay.
It'll just confine it within that space.
Sorry,
But That'll be,
No,
that'll be
you're-
just a
you're
metal,
great.
that's just a metal pole building, not insulated, not anything.
Okay.
The only reason we're building it, we're literally just spending $200,000 to make sure that we never cause a power. problem again.
Sure.
And that literally is what it comes down to, is we just don't want to have any more problems with the power. We know it's been a hassle for the city, and we don't want it to be a hassle anymore. And so we said, forget it. Like, these minor solutions we're doing aren't cutting it. Let's spend the money and just put it under a building. So that's what we're doing.
And thank you. That's very helpful. The other part that I'm thinking about is, you know, one of the mitigating recommendations was the fence, and that's for outdoor storage. And my question, and we talked about this briefly in our work session, Steve, I don't know if, you know, how this is defined, but by the time you put up, you know, this facility they're talking about that's enclosed on 2 sides open, it's got a roof. Is that still considered outdoor storage at that point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We would have to look at, see if it meets the intent of what it is that we would consider not to be outdoor storage. I'd really have to look at that one and work with Jake on coming up with an interpretation, but it does present an interesting question. I wish I could give you a quick answer.
Thank you. guess, learn more about that, but carry on with the light yellow.
Up at the top by the red new building that's, about 35,000 square feet is another kind of yellowish area. That's where when the panel comes out of the red new building, it goes into this panel staging area. In that area, we put the panels together and they are bound tight with straps. Now, we obviously don't build a building out of samples this size. The panels are 4 feet wide and they're anywhere from 4 feet long to 40 feet long. And they weigh 1.5 pounds a square foot. So if you have a 4 foot by 40 feet, that's 160 plus half again. That one panel weighs 250 pounds. And if you bundle that to 6 or 7 others with straps, if the wind's going to move that, we got more trouble than just a little, a wind moving our system. In the amount of time we've been here in 6 years, we've never had the wind move our panel. Now, we did have a windstorm that almost took the roof off our building, but it still didn't move our panel. And so, I think that part of it, we can take care of very well. And that's the rows that as you look on this drawing, and you might, some of the questions, if I was in your shoes that I'd ask was, I got so much of it, part of it is trying with the foam itself is just trying to have enough foam, because when we start into a project like with Amazon, if we don't meet their timelines, their penalties are just absolutely, they're enormous. They can put a business out of business. And so we've always tried to say, when we take that kind of a project, we got to have our material ahead of time. Now, that's on the incoming. The steel goes in the building the minute it comes on site, because we can't have it in the weather before it goes through our manufacturing equipment. That affects our certifications. So today, if you go over there, you'd see 1 million pounds of steel sitting on the floor inside our facility. And we keep it inside, and it comes plastic wrapped and tarped. And so the panel that we're showing over here, a lot of times as we work with these large construction companies, we'll set up a production schedule. And we need that because I need to bring in the raw goods. And then they have called me and they said, we're having trouble with our stormwater plant. We can't get our grading done. Without the grading, I can't pour a slab. Without the slab, I can't take your material. And so there's times they've pushed 2, 3, 4 months, and we've had to hold on to it and couldn't deliver. But the second that they're able to take delivery, we ship it. And I really don't have a lot of fear of them backing out, because we require a 56% deposit down on that material. And so we get rid of it as quick as we possibly can. But sometimes it's not up to us. I've got one client right now that's building 17 buildings in Las Vegas. And he's given me a complete layout month by month by month by month. Now, we won't bring all of his material in today. We'll bring it in. But others have had to push because of problems with their project.
Yeah, well, let's go here first.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I'm hearing you, and I'm looking at this photo, and I got a construction background, and I know bringing in product. And when you're busy, there's a lot of, I don't know, just unload it right over there. I don't have time for you. Just unload it right over there. And the dilemma is it's getting away from you. And I understand that you want to build a controlled area to stick it under. That I'm not thinking that's really the problem. It is the stuff that you're not anticipating, because I'm looking at this photo and you've got stacks on where it's just dirt. And you've got a lot of materials here. And so I'm just wondering, and this is a suggestion I brought up. You go down to the docks and you see a lot of that stuff just has a mesh. It's about 10-inch squares or foot squares that stretch down and hold things in place. And I'm wondering if that would be an option, it would maybe be cheaper for you guys. And when you had these loads come in and you're in a hurry and you got to have it because you've ordered it and you're backed up, you can't stick everything under this one building because you're clear full. Is that?
So the good news is we've actually built that building to where it'll have way more capacity. We hope to be able to stay just enough spot, close to 200,000 square feet of final building. And so really that's been our number right now is trying to keep it below the level where the wind can go. We're trying to keep it lower than the current buildings so the wind couldn't get to it.
Okay.
We've had to spread it out. And what you're referencing on that dirt spot is actually material that's already been made into the wire.
Oh,
And
okay.
so what happened
Good
with
job.
all of that is right now, I have over 500,000 square feet of finished product sitting outside because 220,000 square feet was supposed to go to Indiana. They started one building, couldn't get the site ready for the other one. It's staying until next month. I've got 240,000 square feet that was supposed to go to California. They had to redo their seismic plan because the engineering got messed up. There's the only place. I've got other projects that have 40,000 square feet. And it just seems like all of a sudden, all these things that were supposed to move forward just got stuck. And so literally that stuff in the dirt, we've never, ever had a problem with. It's just the stuff right next to the building.
So the loose foam, you're anticipating is gonna fit underneath that with ease. Oh, okay. All right.
A typical time I'll store about 100, the max I ever had is 150 square feet of raw foam. I don't like to keep it around. Honestly, I'd like to drop it less than that because the longer it stays outside, the more yellow it gets, and people don't like it when it shows up. So my goal is actually bring it in and get it out of there. I'd really like to keep it between 50 and 100,000 square feet, but I'll have capacity to store 200,000 square feet just in case something went crazy. We had to shut down for 2 weeks and I needed to keep taking foam to where I could keep storing it in there and then run it through later. And so I don't see that now. The other part of that though is that building you built, the other yellow building on the back. If I ever needed to, it will be enclosed as well, but it will be enclosed on 3 sides actually. And so that actually out in that area, it's much bigger. I could double the foam area if I needed to and put it out in the back there. So really our goal is that we have covered everywhere so that we never have a foam issue ever again. And honestly, I mean, if I'm being 100% truthful, I hate it when the wind blows and breaks the foam too. Every time one of those 12-foot sections of foam blows off, it costs me $70. And I bet we've lost $10,000 to $12,000 just this year in foam that hasn't gone up. It just falls over and breaks. And at that point, I can't use it anymore. And so at the end of the day, I want it secured just as much as you guys do, because I don't want to be breaking raw goods that I can't use to make anything when I have to cycle and switch back.
Thanks, that answered it.
That is, right at the moment, we're in a little bit of a mess because we need to hook on to the sewer. Because we're going to redo the asphalt out there in front to accommodate that high yellow one. We want to have, that's not just going to be in dirt, that's going to have asphalt and concrete under it. And so before we do that, we need to hook onto the sewer. We would really like to put the power underground that comes from out on the street and go underground and go right into our transformer because I just feel like that helps us when we get moving and somebody picks up stuff with a forklift, and if they're not paying attention, you can come, somewhat close to those lines, and we don't want to do that. So right now, as you look at it, it does out front look like it's kind of in disarray, but I can promise you that the minute we get that yellow two-sided building up, it'll all come in underneath, and it'll all be stacked up, and it'll all be nice and tight. And then the other storage out here, like Martha said, that's our product going out. And if I had my way, it would go out every single day the minute it comes out the door. But most of these big buildings, they don't want you shipping one truck and then another truck. They want to see, 2 or 3 walls coming all together. So we'll send 6, 8, 10 trucks a day. And one of the things that was brought up is trucks coming to the facility. We have a steel truck that shows up almost every Sunday night. And we have one shipper that brings it, and we have one vendor where we buy it. And so what we're looking at is that truck coming up industrial is, honestly, I don't like this other road. There's too many residential things over there. we bring them up, we turn them in, and they would be completely off the street. If you look on there, you can see the truck sitting there sideways inside the property. They'd be able to sit right there on Sunday or Saturday or whenever, and then on Monday morning, all they would have to do is pull over into one of our unloading zones. And then that way, we don't have trucks out on the street.
That was gonna be one of my questions was transportation as you grow. Are we dealing with a traffic situation? Originally, there was a rail spur, but that's gone, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was gone before we got there. That was
Okay.
Schumacher.
Yeah,
They have the rail spur and that was along the one side of the building and that hasn't been used since I've been.
so as you grow and become larger and larger, which is what you want to do.
We're
Oh,
actually fine for that. And so really, as you look at this, there's that raw material stored at the very bottom. We maintain a very large area so that we can actually just pull from those stacks and load the trucks right in that area right there. And so, and even when we get really busy, the thought of loading 10 trucks a day is the most. we'd be able to do.
how many? 8 to 10 in and out.
I mean, probably honest, right now, we're looking more like 5. And so, you know, when we get a lot bigger, you know, you can send it to the most, but you're not easily get conduit within that area. We can actually park with the way that's set up, 3 at any given time, we can be loading 3 off at the same time. So, I don't see it being-
So is our current infrastructure capable of handling that kind of traffic?
I mean, right now, it wasn't the requirements, the good news about our product is it's own, so it's so light.
Yeah.
That you don't really have to have the input build or anything like that to prepare, but we'll make sure that our asphalt area, well, it's actually gonna be concrete, where the local trucks that are concrete slab is viable to maintain that traffic. You know, it shouldn't really do anything to the street, it would just be like an empty one, just basically drop one up and getting ready.
And just a reminder for the planning commission, we are looking at the conditional use permit for outdoor storage. This is not a review of the building plans. It's interesting, but I just want to remind you.
I think it is helpful. Before we go into the other comments, I just want to, again, clarify, what's in scope. So yes, it is the conditional use permit, but we're really talking, the only reason that's even an issue to begin with is because of the 2 yellow sections, correct?
Yes, and before you leave, that other piece that we've placed down there is just so that we can move the material that's sitting right on our building footprint and have a place to take it so that we can get the crane in there to lift up the tilt-up walls, to get a concrete truck in there to pour it. We need to have that kind of as a buffer. That's only over the construction of our building, and then that just goes away.
So with respect, thank you, with
Yes.
respect to the conditional uses, then, typically, this is something that, assuming we can mitigate any anticipated nuisances, there's no reason not to move forward. And so we want to understand what those might be. We talked about one is the litter. It blows away, it creates a problem with power line, it just creates, we got foam all over the city. So that's one thing. So the litter, there's what else? I mean, what, as you look at your operation, what else could feasibly, with this outdoor storage, be considered a nuisance?
And that's honestly what we try to look at. So really noise wise, it's just a forklift and propane forklifts.
And electric.
Yeah, the ones that make noise. Propane ones. Now, other than that, I mean, there really is nothing else to do, because it's just foam and still won't go anywhere. It won't blow into pieces that comes out, and so it's just foam, that's it. And, I mean, we try to think of ways to mitigate all that. The big foams, in some ways, I think we've handled that with this building we're doing. The other thing that we have a problem with is right now what we stack on, because we have to stack our little particles of foam. We don't want that blowing into the city of the neighbors as well. And so our plan is, even if the city require, we want to fence those areas where the foam could blow. So as it blows against the wall. And then we've actually purchased some big industrial vacuums. You can just go along, suck it all up, and then we can take it back to the baler and recycle it as well. And so trying to make sure that it's all as enclosed as possible, so there is no way for anything to get out. But beyond that, no liquid waste, and there's just nothing else we use in the whole process other than steel and foam. That's it.
Now, this EPS, is it? I couldn't tell from just looking at it, but I put together a bookshelf that came in foam packaging. I don't know what kind of foam that was, but it crumbled everywhere and sticks to my walls and it's all over my house. Does this stuff do that? Does that
Depends on
crumble?
on the density. There's about 6 different densities of this foam. And you can go all the way from a half a pound to a pound, which is what we use, to a pound and a half and 2 and so forth. And so, you know, we don't use the denser foam because it has a tendency to want to crumble. The lighter foams usually will hang together better.
But even then, there's always gonna be little particles that come off, and we wanna mitigate that. I mean, that's part of our long-term plan, is to build those structures so that even if anything does come off, it won't be going in there.
That'd be part of the question. It's not just a panel or a foam
It's a little
sheet
stuff.
blowing off. It's the, you've got this stuff
Well,
blowing
honestly,
throughout the
other
city.
things that we're doing is we're investing in permanent dunnage right now in the Stockton material.
Just
We have to
imagine
cut,
it up.
we have to cut little pieces off and we use that to stack the panel on outside. And that's actually where the majority of that crumbling takes place, is because it doesn't fall apart easily, but if you hit it with the forklift on the side, you're gonna gouge that piece out and it does crumble. And so we're gonna invest in steel, and that steel will be the dunnage. And so that way, even if you do hit the steel, obviously it doesn't affect the foam above it. And so not using that foam dunnage on the ground level, where it's more likely to get hit, will also take away the majority of what we've had in the past as well.
And so it's stacked like that, and you put the steel dunnage under it. When the forklift comes in, it really can't hit this because it's going under this. So where that crumbling's coming is that dunnage underneath. We're eliminating that, putting steel underneath that. And now we're able to pick it up and we don't have any dunnage that's trying to break or do anything else.
That's only an issue for our conditional use permit because it's stored outside.
Yeah,
Otherwise, if you were doing that inside your building, it just rolls around and.
Honestly, I mean, that's one thing I want you guys to understand is we look at Morgan as our long-term plan. And realistically, if there is an issue, I mean, I wish I could tell you everything was gonna be a problem. I don't know. We've never done this before. I mean, we've grown 10x in the last year. We didn't think we were gonna grow X. And so we've encountered issues that we had no clue. I mean, we're so happy that we have those issues as opposed to a year ago when I was selling kidneys to try and make payments. But at this point, you know, our goal is if there's a problem, just bring it to us. I'll fix it. Because I want to be here in Morgan. I really do. I mean, we're investing, over the next year, we'll invest almost $10 million in what we're doing because we want to stay here. And I don't want anybody mad at me. I want everybody here to like us, to feel like we're a great part of the community, that we're hiring for great wages, that we're doing all that because we're from a small town. We want to live in a small town. And so I can't see every problem that's going to happen. Some might not know, but I promise you that if something does happen, I'll fix it.
Thank you. Mr. Little, in our work session, you had a concern about one of the mitigation write-ups. Am I misspeaking or does that sound familiar? I just want to make sure your concern is heard. They've covered it. Okay. Lance, I haven't gotten to you. Sorry, I missed you. You're up.
You're fine. Just a few questions. How tall is the, your EPS storage building gonna be? What's the height on that gonna
same
be?
height as the building we've got right now. That's where the roof will be.
So it'll be,
Yeah.
it'll be actually like a foot higher on one side and
Yeah.
a foot lower on the other side.
Okay.
But basically trying to keep it at the same height.
Okay, I was just kind of figuring cubic foot of storage in there, so it'll match up with the building that's there. Okay, how tall then? So you'll fill that right to the roof, enclosed on two sides. How tall, over in your finished panel storage, how tall will you?
So I mean, that's one of the things we need to talk
Okay,
to you guys
yeah,
about.
so here we are. I mean, storage wise, square foot wise, can you get by with 10 foot tall? Can you get by with 6 foot tall? Or do you need to go 20 feet
No, no,
tall?
I wouldn't want to go 20 feet tall.
I'm
No.
probably exaggerating a little bit, but
I
yeah,
actually tried it before. The problem is that where that wire is, it'll bend the wires. a little bit.
yeah, and that's,
So we don't want to do that.
yeah, I kind of wondered what weight it would support of itself.
Oh, sure. I mean, it
So-
doesn't cause any permanent damage to the panel. It just looks cosmetic.
Mhm.
We don't want to send that out to our buyers. And so realistically, if I had my perfect world, what I would ask, I just allow me to go 10, 12 feet high, and that's more than, I mean, at that high, I can store 1 million square feet in that space that we have allocated. And I'll be okay, because you have to remember every panel, so that means I can store 20 panels high,
Mhm.
so I can go 10 feet. And so I take whatever my square footage is there and I times it by 20.
Yeah.
And that's what I get.
And the finished panel area is not covered.
No, it's not. And so that's where, I mean, just throwing it out there, 'cause I think we should discuss it all. You guys are asking questions, may as well go for it. You tell me I can only go to 6, I'll support that. If I can go higher, I would love to be able to go up to that kind of 10, 12-foot mark so that I can store as much out there as possible.
Well,
Can I
yeah.
address that?
Well, and one more quick question, your wall, your concrete wall you're showing, are you just gonna do a 6 foot there or what will, whatever we maybe would allow then, you'd go as tall as we would?
Honestly, would like to go over that with you. If you're like, hey, you just want that fence there really to keep the little crumbly things in. We don't want you to go super tall along that road. We don't want you to, we don't need to do that. But no, we want you to go high enough that it blocks and I'll build it to the height. I don't know what the code is.
You can go higher than 6. It's a minimum of 6. I don't know what the maximum is, or if there is one.
Well, I can promise you, we're not gonna go 20 feet.
Hey,
That's just not gonna happen, because it actually creates a problem when you got, let's say I gotta take the first 2 top bundles off. That means I've gotta go full extension on the forklift, and I've gotta exactly make that fit, and then need to pick it up, and it becomes not a good thing. And so we right at the present time, we're probably 90% of everything we've got over there is 12 feet.
Or less.
Yeah, or less.
That's the biggest thing.
Jake, you are going to add more context as well.
yeah, one thing on the fence, it says, this is the fence code for the city. It says, generally, no fence shall exceed 6 feet in height without planning commission approval. No fence shall exist over 8 feet without an engineer's approval. So what the planning commission could do is tonight, since we're having this meeting, you could include in the conditional use permit the approval for the applicant to go higher than 6. That is at your discretion. If it's going to go over 8, then we would have to get engineering approval. Now, in terms of building material height, the ordinance is specific. It does say outdoor storage can't be higher than the fence. That's what the ordinance says. And I talked with Steve about that. And the recommendation would be that planning commission suggests to the applicant that during a development agreement, they ask the city council to approve something different. So the planning commission doesn't have the authority to override the city's ordinance. However, the city council can through a development agreement, which could happen at the building permit phase or later on. I'm gonna have Steve correct me here in a second. But so what I'm saying is you can go higher with the fence, and then the stacking material is something that would be negotiated in a development agreement, because that would be overriding, or we can update the city ordinance, which would take time.
We can actually build fences out of, I'm sure, use them for sand walls.
Building down the freeways back east.
They can go super high, and so I'm not worried about that. If you want higher, I'll go higher. If you want lower, I'll go lower. Then we're here just to say whatever you guys want, make this work. Tell us what you want, and we'll make it work.
I just suggest one thing for you to think about. Maybe look at the fence at 8 or 10 feet and then put 2 or 3 feet of chain link on top of it. We've already done that back east. And then that way you don't look like you're building a Great Wall of China. And it still takes care of whatever height limit you're comfortable with.
I think is the purpose behind that, though, is to try and block out. the view
There is
of
a
it.
word that says impervious.
Yes, yeah.
So then I'd rather it be straight concrete because it's cheaper. And so whatever you guys want. But
Well, we got one more comment. And then I'll turn it over to Jeff.
So we're going to asphalt that.
It's not out in the dirt, it's on a hard surface.
right now it is.
Right now it's out setting on Dunning.
Because my concern, and Nate alluded to it a little bit when you started talking about it may crumble. And I'm thinking it would be a whole lot easier to clean up off of a hard surface than it would out in a dirt pile.
That's exactly what the plan right now is. I mean, again, we're just scrambling to make this plan work. And so we bought that property next to us. But the plan is, that as we, we're not talking about the new building, but as we build that new building, we're gonna concrete the back ends where we're actually working on stuff and loading, so that way it's easier to pull up off of, and the whole rest of it will be concrete. So
All right.
again, it can just be stuck off. So it'll all be.
Hard surface.
All be hard surface, every bit of it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your time. If you have any more questions, we'd be happy to answer, or, you know, if, again, I invite anytime you've got 5 minutes, just drop over and walk in the door. It's, you know, we'd love to have you come, what we'd like to have Morgan be known as, is this is one of the products that you can stamp and say, made in Morgan, Utah.
I love the Morgan made.
I have people that call me all the time, hey, I saw one of your trucks in Kansas, and then, you know, Illinois and Kentucky, and they're like, wow, you know, you're shipping this stuff everywhere. Well, we really are.
Thank you for that. Teresa, will you pull up in the packet the site plan for just the item number 2 on the, not the leased property, but I just want to make sure that we're considering these individually, even though they're related.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? And so when we're talking about outdoor storage, we're not talking about just the stuff in yellow, right? We're talking about fencing for the entire block shown, correct?
Mm.
So with our recommendation that we're going to be putting through tonight for the conditional use permit, it is to give that recommendation on allowing a fence that's over 6 feet. And are we deciding on where it needs to go? Or is it already built? It's already in this. It just has to, because
I would
Outdoor
suggest to go on
outdoor-
the entire perimeter except where buildings are on the property
So if you look at
line.
this will all be building back here, so we'll go the fence all the way down this side, and then all the way around this way. So that all of that area is actually covered. That building all the way down this side.
Okay, so we're going to recommend the size, the height that can be, the height of that wall, that fence that will be in that particular space, not around the yellow building in the bottom left. No. Only on those sides.
If you're not storing there, then it's not needed.
And just to clarify 2 things then, Justin, with the term recommendation, we will be as a commission approving, granting the conditional use permit. So this is like our first item will not be passed on to the city council. We'll grant either grant or not grant the conditional use permit. The question that I have is what you just said at the end though. We just mapped out where the fence will be. I'm curious about that, the bright yellow at the bottom left though. That to me is still the question mark that would have to be worked out. Does that count as outdoor storage or not? And if it does, then by code, that area also would have to be fenced in. And so that's just a determination that will have to be worked out, but the rest of it makes total sense. So that being said, any other questions or go ahead?
So is the outer wall of that yellow part of the building, would that be considered like a fence?
Yes, I mean, it's
So if they
not
enclose that
considered
all
a
in,
fence, but
then,
it's
yeah.
enclosed.
yeah, so it'd be redundant to put a fence right next to the side of the building, is what we're
Yes.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and at that point, it's
On
It's
that
enclosed, yeah.
side. For the front would still potentially require it, right? 'Cause it's only
Yeah.
2 sides enclosed.
and on the fence, it's, I mean, if the applicant was putting material outside of the fenced or enclosed area, then he's in violation of the conditional use permit. So I mean, that's up to him. You could just say require that the perimeter of the outdoor storage be fenced or enclosed with the building. And then it's up to them to decide, do we need that area or not? We want to be in compliant, and so we'll have a fence around the entire perimeter of our outdoor storage or an enclosed building.
Thank you. What other discussion items with respect to this project or this application, I should say?
I have one question. On the yellow, buildings, the two sides will have walls and two will not. Which sides have walls?
This one out here towards the road, so nothing can do that. So if I will come in here, let it stop and you can go and pull out into the building. So this side open, this side open, this side closed.
So in that case, maybe you would need a fence on the, yeah, on that side.
Building that's already there, especially if it's all of them. So would we make a recommendation that south side be equal to and only?
Your mic's off.
Yeah, we gotta get the foam all the way through, so we unload on one side, push it forward, take it out on the other side and take it to the building. If we fold three sides of it, then I gotta figure out some way to get the forklift all the way around. We kind of have a problem right now with it, because right now we're stacked up against the building. Rarely do we get the foam on the back in the building, because they bring more and we stack in front of it. This way, it's always shifting across and it goes right in the building, right in the building. Now, if we need to put some type of a stop, I mean, I don't know, when I was a kid, my uncle had a hay barn and he had some big steel posts that fit in the ground on one side and he would push the hay up against it. And then when he got ready to take it out, he pulled the pipe out and and so we could do something like that to give it some additional security. But as Marcus said, if you work with us and let us see what this does, if we have nothing that's moving, we'd be good. If it moves, trust me, we'll be the first one out to drilling holes and putting pipe in. So that it actually forces that where it can't move at all. And as I said, 9 times out of 10, it's trying to take the foam off the top.
Chairman, just to let you know, Mr. Garza, I needed to leave the meeting.
Okay.
But if we do have a question, we can get that answer via text.
Yeah, then I just have that open question of what's considered outdoor storage on a two-wall enclosed building. But what other discussion items?
On that point, we can just make that a condition. If that is deemed as outdoor storage, and then it's subject to that code. So
What's being pushed through? Just one more quick question. When you talk about, you want to push it through from, the way I'm looking at it, from right to left. And then what's coming out the other side? Is it a forklift? Is it a delivery truck?
The truck will pull up here, to pull the foam off, put it on this direction. So we'll have a system inside that will go forward.
Fair.
So that way it comes in here, and this right now is concrete. So it comes through here and a forklift takes it off, puts it in, and a forklift takes it off.
I'm just trying to think if a fence is indeed required, depending on what the definition comes out, you could put it right on the boundary line and still get a forklift through. Yeah, okay. Okay, that's all I was clarifying.
That's probably the easy solution. But plus it gives you consistency that you either have a building or a fence on the entire perimeter.
So would I have to do a fence up the entire side, or just where the storage is?
Just where the storage is, but maybe for aesthetics and consistency and being a good neighbor, you consider going the whole way.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to talk through this and take some action? I'm seeing heads nod, so for those that are not seeing us nod heads, let's maybe frame this in the form of a motion and what we'd like to do.
Chair, would you like me to go over the notes that I have on this, on it at all, of what was proposed that was not clarified on the map?
I think that'd be helpful if it helps inform our action.
So what was not clarified on the outdoor, on the site plan that was submitted is I put a note that the EPS storage unit that's the bright yellow is considered outdoor storage, will be a canopy type structure, pole barn with 2 sides open, 2 sides closed. That the outdoor storage finished product is the one that's in the middle, that weighs quite a bit. That the height, originally, the height is still in question on the fencing due to that's not on the map. So that has to be clarified in your motion. The banding area is a finished product that just gets banded, and so that shouldn't be an issue with flying. That if you want to go higher, it does need to go in a development agreement with the city council as far as storage that's outside. I think that's all I had.
Okay. I think I'm clear on just about everything, but maybe just to double check that panel banding area. That's building.
No.
3 sides,
Three sides. Okay, that's what I thought.
3 sides and a roof.
We established the height of that fence. That's one thing.
Well, so
We can only,
Oh,
you were gonna say the same thing. Go ahead.
well, we can authorize it to be built over 6 feet.
oh, okay.
So we can authorize it to be built over 6 feet. Anything over 8 feet requires engineering involvement, but we can authorize that as part of this. Get everything?
Materials to be kept on site, cleaned up within 12 hours. Tie down material, which they already do anyway, but still putting in would be good.
Okay.
One more thing. When this stuff blew up before, and I don't know the answer to this, and it knocked out the power, who is responsible for that?
We paid. We did that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, let's put it this way, I just got a bill.
All right,
So, Mr. Chair, can we make a motion?
let's do.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the outdoor storage area as defined in these drawings with the conditions listed here, along with authorizing the fence to be higher than 6 feet.
I think you should state the conditions.
Okay, so each condition that, well, the installation of the fence can be over 6 feet. That the materials stored cannot be higher than the installed fence per the code. That materials are to be kept on site. When blown off site, they should be cleaned up within 12 hours. In the case of wind events, the owner is responsible to tie the materials down to prevent the blowing off site. And then the last one would be when the building permit comes up. So those other previous stated conditions.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion is seconded. Thank you. Prior to voting, any discussion on this particular action?
Do we need to do a maximum fence height. We've allowed over 6, but do we need to do a maximum fence height that we would allow? Or is that,
y- you can do that.
I
Mm.
think the risk is low.
okay?
I mean, I don't think they're gonna wanna put a 20-foot fence.
No, I don't expect over about a 12-foot fence, which I think in this type of area is fine. I just didn't know if anyone was not.
I suppose
with
we could
that.
stipulate that, but
I don't know. For aesthetics, I would say 10. I don't know if the applicant has an issue with, would you want to go 12? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Maybe you put no taller than 12 feet.
Not to exceed 12.
Yeah.
Would be
Okay.
potentially, but here's the other question I have is, depending on how high you're stacking these things, let's say they stack up and now they're 14 feet high. And you can see that over the 12-foot fence. At that point, should that ever be a thing, that's where we're talking about. We don't have the authority to change the ordinance. The ordinance says you can't see it from, it needs to be impervious, right? And so that would have to come through this development agreement that Mr. Young was talking about with the city council and figuring out how to work through that. As far as what we can approve, this is our limit. So does that require, a change then? Mr. Little, keep me in
Well, I
line with
think-
procedure here.
You've indicated that if it goes over this 10, it's gotta go to city council for development agreement. So the maximum height to be addressed at that point by city council. I don't think this board needs for maximum height. That would be addressed in the development agreement with city council.
That's for the storage height. Actually, how high to stack it can't be higher than the fence. That would need to go to the city council, but the planning commission can authorize a higher fence.
I thought you said over 10 foot, the plan had to go in development agreement with city council to approve the.
I don't think there's a height on is there anywhere in the ordinance that says the fence height per city council?
I couldn't find anything on there.
No. We were just crossing wires with the stacking height versus the fence height.
Yeah, it's just, all it is the engineering of anything over 8 feet.
Yeah, so they'll have to come in with engineering walls for higher than
As far as the
8.
discussion with what the motion is on the table, the one thing you were considering was the language not to exceed 12 feet. And I mean, that's what I heard. I just asking.
I think it's good to do that.
And then Ray, sorry, teach me, this is a learning moment.
That's fine.
You got an open motion on the table. Does it have to be an amendment to that?
The way to do that, probably you could make an amendment. Casually in the council, they sometimes just ask the maker if he's okay with that change, and use that casually. Partly why you should make an amendment.
So casual.
I am okay with that change. To,
Okay, and then are you okay with that change? Any other discussion on this motion as outlined? Let's go ahead and vote on this. If you'll put Jay back up on the screen for us. All in favor of granting the conditional use permit for this Innovative Solutions outdoor storage located at 375 East, 400 North. Please vote now. Okay, that looks unanimous. Thank you. The conditional use permit's granted. That does take us to item number 3. What's that? Well, we're hoping we've addressed all the issues and that this is, we'll see. But Jake, would you mind orienting us to this particular request, which is a temporary conditional use permit?
Yes.
For the same company located on an adjacent property that they're leasing from a different owner.
Yeah, so this is the property right here, kind of kitty corner. And address is 464 North Industrial Park Road. I don't know where the park came from. Okay, that's Industrial Road. So you'll see it located right here on your screen. And here are the main project parcels. And as the applicant indicated, it's for temporary storage of material while they build their building. The outdoor storage ordinance is still the same for temporary. So those items are still the same. And the only thing I'm gonna go over is we like legal proof, affidavit from the owner that he's received permission for the CUP. That could be a condition that they can follow up. He does have email.
So what's the difference? Does it need to be notarized? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that he legally is representing. Yeah.
Okay, I was hoping it was something more than an email, actually. That makes me feel better.
So that could be a condition that the owner could provide that afterwards. The other suggestions are still the same, the tying down, the cleanup, and then also a temporary fence, just to keep it in, maybe a construction fence or something like that. I just think that would be good practice.
So the code still uses the word impervious though, correct?
Where it's temporary, I think that's where. Just to clarify, the only thing that we stored over there is the finished product. And so it's just the big stacks of stuff. It's no raw goods. And so against that stuff, can't move because it's stuff still over there.
Okay.
And
that
and
the
so you're making the
same
case that
stuff?
you don't need a temporary fence.
Well, honestly, I'm just saying.
So you have the finished panel storage
I'm
on,
not gonna fence it, mine. This property, to be honest with you.
Okay.
He's needed 2 months, all
okay,
full of building, and that's
I
it.
see. So this is just,
It's
this
just like
this
get
is
stuff off to where I want.
even more
concrete and
temporary than I
asphalt.
thought.
I need to get that off of there so I can concrete and asphalt.
Got it.
And then I can move it back. And so literally just to take it over there, store it, asphalt it, and then move it back if I hadn't.
So we're talking, what would be the time frame then for
At
that?
the most December. And that's, I have it leased right now for December.
And I would suggest you just make it longer though. I mean, hopefully you get it done for your sake, but just so they're not back here asking for it.
Potentially a year.
Yeah, I would say less than a year, but that's up to the plan. There you go.
Here's an authority question that I have, and this might have been more of a Steve type of question. The code says fence. And this is temporary. It doesn't make a lot of sense to build, obviously, on the leased land for 6 to 9 months, a permanent structure. On the other hand, a construction fence or chain link fence is something that doesn't seem to really address whatever the issue is, which is, the site and or the crumble blowing around, and the chain link fence isn't going to stop that, even if it had a netting or something. I mean, could we say, because it's temporary? I mean, can we just waive the requirement? Can we say don't need a fence? I'm just asking. I don't know.
I think that is a Steve question. You want to text him that, Teresa? Yeah,
It seems, if we can, if there's something we need to mitigate, let's mitigate it. But if it's something that we're just installing for the sake of installing and there's nothing that it's mitigating, other than maybe that visual, and that visual is not a permanent thing, or we'd require the fence. But being a temporary thing, and that's the only nuisance, is that we're gonna see stacks of stuff instead of a wall. It feels like I would just as soon not have one. Seems like a waste, but that's my thought. So, other discussion.
My thought is just the safety of it. And
you get a bunch of kids over there in the middle of the night thinking it's gonna be awesome to climb up there and not, it sounds like they're heavy enough not to tip over or anything, but just a safety thing. It's a pain in the backside to put it up, but maybe to just keep people out of there is the only thing I can think of, but I don't know. I'm with you, Nate. I don't know if it's, that big of a deal.
If kids get that wild hair idea, fence will keep them out. Fence will solve that question.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Nobody's ever hit golf balls off the top of the towers of the cement plant, I can tell you that. No one I know. Let's,
I'd agree. If there's a way for us to do that, I mean, the rest of it,
What you could do is make the recommendation and that legal counsel essentially defer the question of the fence to legal counsel, and then we can just have Steve follow up on that.
so let me just play that back. Assuming we phrase a motion from the standpoint of granting temporary conditional use permit, we could make that even conditional upon legal counsel weighing in on if and what nature of the fence.
I think you just would omit the fence if that's what you want to do. If you want, if the decision on the fence is based on legal counsel, then just
Well, what part of it is I don't want to grant an approval that's illegal because we grant an approval and don't require a fence, and now we've created a conflict.
yeah, okay. So maybe say the condition of a temporary fence will defer to legal counsel follow up. Is that okay, the applicant?
Can't that be approved before? If it has to have a fence.
Yes, yeah.
Any other discussion items on this particular request? At this point, then let's make or take action one way or another on this. And anyone would like to proffer a motion, I'll entertain that.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve it was a temporary conditional use permit for the property located at 464 Industrial Road for the temporary storage of finished material by Innovative Structural Solutions, deferring to legal counsel for installation of a fence 6 feet or taller, materials being stored no higher than the fence code, or as okay, what do we do with that? Do we want to do say cap the known finished materials higher than 12 feet with the omission of a fence by legal counsel, materials to be kept on site and cleaned up within 12 hours. We've also been provided a legal affidavit that the applicants receive permission in case of wind events, the applicant to tie materials to prevent blowing off site. We will do the temporary conditional use permit with a maximum of 10 months. And I believe that's all the conditions we have.
That's a mouthful. Thank you for
Take a breath now.
putting that together. Do we have a second on the motion? Yeah, I've got it right in front of me.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Justin. The motion has been seconded. Prior to voting, again, let's open this up for any final discussion, if there is any. Not hearing any discussion, we'll go ahead and vote. Those in favor of granting the temporary conditional use permit as outlined, please indicate. And that was unanimous as well, Teresa, so no nays. Thank you. That takes us through.
You should understand the long range plan as well.
That's helpful. Appreciate it. This takes us to our last item on the agenda, which again, I'll turn to Mr. Jake Young with representing the staff perspective on the discussion for accessory dwelling units, primarily as this is something that has come up from a concerned citizen. And you take it from here, Jake.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Also, I'm going to recognize Mr. David Castro here. He's a resident and interested in building accessory dwelling unit on his property and has approached staff to look at the ordinance and that. And also I want to mention this is on the work session at City Council next week. And so they'll also be taking a look at it. No, we're not voting on an ordinance tonight. We're not voting on approval of a land use. This is a discussion item and a direction for staff and or asking City Council if they would also like to encourage the creation of an ordinance. So by way of background, ADUs are not permitted in, and Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, ADUs are not permitted in city code, in the Morgan City Code. However, they are permitted by state code. And I want to guess it was HB 85, but I don't remember the exact number. 82, thank you. HB 82 from a couple years ago. And what that does is that requires that all cities, there's some exclusions for college towns, but I don't believe we fit into that exclusion, permit internal ADUs. So the term is internal ADUs or IADUs, accessory dwelling units in the state code. And what the state ordinance allows is for cities to require parking stalls. This allows cities to do these requirements: parking stalls, owner occupancy, and a few other. So the state says, you as a city must allow accessory dwelling units. They can be built by right. However, if you like and you create an ordinance, then you can create certain requirements. You can do a business permit so that you're tracking who has an ADU, who's renting one. It helps with documenting affordable housing, which Morgan City will have to do when you reach 5,000 people. And so internal ADUs are allowed by state code. Now, the other two type of ADUs, and I brought this up, this is from the general plan draft, but it does, show some different options. There's maybe an attached ADU, and this is where you would come in and build onto a structure, adding an ADU on the side or on top, or you're just adding on to home to have an attached ADU, and that is not permitted by code. Mr. Castro is interested in that, and then also the other.
What's the difference between an attached ADU and just a duplex?
A duplex is two structures that are equal. An ADU is considered a secondary structure. You're as a secondary residential unit. So your home is your primary residential unit, and then the ADU is a secondary residential. As opposed to equal. A duplex would be an equal on the same property. And a twin home are two units attached. It's like two townhomes attached on separate parcels. So that's the difference between a twin and a duplex.
Sure.
Yeah, and then, and an internal, what it means is that within the building footprint. So within your home, whether you're doing a remodel or it's part of the original construction, if it's within the building footprint, then it's an internal ADU and permitted by state code. Attached is doing an addition on, and then the third example is a detached ADU. You see these examples here. I've actually done quite a bit with ADUs. I did Salt Lake County. I did statewide research. We did two research reports statewide, surveying cities who permits ADUs, who doesn't, all the issues, all of that. I can share that with you. And the sessions that I've conducted at the Utah League of Cities and Towns, I always asked what cities have illegal ADUs. And almost all the hands go up. And then I've said, if you're not raising your hand, you just don't know your residents well enough, because every city has illegal ADUs. That means somebody is renting to a non-family member a portion of their home. And maybe it doesn't happen in Morgan.
Rent out your basement to somebody.
Exactly. If it's a non-family member, then it is. And so the thought at the state level is people are doing it illegally, so let's let it happen. It also uses existing infrastructure, our pipes, our roads, all of that. So it's already happening, but we also have that infrastructure as well. Some of the pushback against it is people think it doubles. Your density will double like soon or immediately. It just doesn't happen. Pleasant Grove is probably one of the progressive cities in the state with ADUs, and they're at about 5 to 10% ADUs. They had a $50 fee. It was really easy to do. They've been allowed it for a long time. It's almost a college town. They're still at 5 to 10%. The big cities like Vancouver, Canada, they're at maybe 25%, but they're in a real housing crunch and it's a different situation. So certainly doubling is not within our lifetimes. If a city like Morgan allowed it, could it get to 10%? Potentially, yeah. So the question is, does Morgan City want to entertain creating an ADU ordinance? I would recommend it at least at the minimum to meet state code so that you can require owner occupancy if you want, or require parking, or require business business permits. And then you can also explore the addition, the attached ADU, or the secondary ADU. The secondary ADU or the detached is, the thing about it is, though, I don't think you can, because the state already says you have to allow internal ADUs, then a person could have 2 ADUs by it. And my city, Farmington, has been doing that for 10 years and it still hasn't been an issue, but that could be a concern as well. You could also do a detached ADU by lot size. Maybe you homes of a certain property, a 1/3 acre or 1/2 acre, have the detached. Cities with large lots like Bluffdale and other places have gone to where they allow detached because they have these really big lots and they want to do that. Enough from me.
Has a comment, question.
Well, you made a comment, you said that attached ADUs are not permitted. I think you said that in the very beginning.
Correct, in Morgan City Code.
So there's actually in the code that says you cannot do an attached ADU, or is just not one there?
There's I don't know if it says they're not
When you
permitted.
say, we say it's not permitted, like, is it just not in there?
ADUs are not permitted in Morgan City, but state code
Supersedes that, right?
supersedes.
Not permitted because it's explicitly outlawed in the code, or not permitted because it's implicitly not referenced in the code?
That's my question.
There is a section on here that talks about accessory dwelling units, residential accessory, residential. And so it specifically does not say no ADUs. It just basically says when a categorize a secondary residential and an accessory, it just is blank, meaning it's prohibited. And so that's where we get the ADU that's not allowed.
Okay.
So it's not permitted because it's not
Not-
specifically called out as permitted, which that's conventional, you know, there's certain things that we just don't know about or do, but they're not permitted because we don't know about them.
So this is a
And- or we don't-
preliminary. Okay.
Oh, where is that under the land use?
Seen. Sure.
Oh, right here, you see that?
Okay.
So you do have a land use for it and it is blank.
Okay, so here's the question. I just want to make sure I'm clear as this is a discussion, no action tonight, obviously. If it comes back to us, it's because next week when the city council entertains this, they may provide direction for us as a commission to pursue this. And if that's the direction we get, then we come back and we take this up and start to craft a ordinance that would accommodate accessory, ADUs. Am I understanding this correctly? Like right now, we're just introducing it. Next week, the city council provides direction. Depending on what they say, it may or may not come back to us to take the next step.
That is correct. And here's just one idea is maybe we could do a little working committee. I don't know if you've done that before, but a member of the city council, obviously can't be a majority, but could be one or two members of the city council and from the planning commission. And we can meet a couple times, online or whatever, and just work through some of the ideas. So as we draft the ordinance, we're in line because there is like I said, there's a wide range of internal, you can do certain things, attached, you can do things, and then detached, if you want to pursue that, you can. And it may be helpful to have a little committee to do a couple meetings, or it could just, the whole thing could work through the planning commission.
Mr.
I'd rather not go at it blind though.
Sure. Okay.
I was probably something we are in the future. Some of the questions I have, like setbacks would still have to be honored, correct? Or
Correct. They would have they'd have their own setbacks.
and you'd have to have you'd have to have a discussion about parking, correct?
Correct.
These would all be things that would be taken into consideration. And the other one is, as I understand it right now, we do not allow rooms in homes to be rented out unless it's a relative. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I don't know your code in and out.
Do
but-
we,
but
do we
that would
want,
be separate.
do
But
we want
you
to
could-
talk about that
Sure.
as well? I mean, if you're talking about,
As far as short-term rentals and Airbnbs, our code doesn't address.
it doesn't, and I remember we talked about this a few months ago that it wasn't a significant issue. However, it's probably a good time to now do it, especially if you're allowing ADUs. Do you want it as a short term? And maybe what we would do is we'd add short term to this land use table. And then you would decide, do you want it or not? And if so, where?
I think there's a lot of things concerning this that we need to kind of get straight on and tighten down and get clear on, as time goes on. Because I see it becoming more and more, probably more and more common, something that's not going to go away, but something we're going to be dealing with more all the time.
And we are having people that have called and asked. And of course, that means there's as many people who ask are those people that aren't, and they're just moving forward with the, housing affordability and things. People are making their mortgage payments by having people live with them. So
I like
Well, for example, just
leaning that you'd indicated. I think
renting out a bedroom,
I think short-term rentals are part and parcel with accessory, dwelling units. All of this, I think, needs to be considered. I love the idea of having this come back to us. So I look forward to that project if that's, what the city council ends up doing.
I think it's kind of gray right now in a lot of areas.
Yeah. Before
Maybe let a
we hear
resident-
from Dave Castro, Jay Ackett's had his hand up for a bit. Let's hear from Jay. And then once Jay's finished.
Oh, sure.
then let's
Okay,
hear from you.
perfect. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jay.
Thanks, Nate. Hey, just in my research on this topic, I think Jake has a ton of experience on this. And so I would lean towards Jake's experience on this a lot. It seems like he's been involved in a lot of discussion on this throughout the state. And so I'd like his opinion on that. And then the biggest thing I gleaned from it all, if it were like just a few words, is quality ADU. If we set a code or parameters around quality, I think it gives us our best chance to do the best we can.
Jay, thank you. We'll hear from Mr. Dave Castro, and then Mr. Prescott has a comment or question as well. Go ahead.
Just been a resident of Morgan since 1994, built a new house over here. So been here for 28 years, had 5 kids graduate from Morgan High. Been here a long time in Morgan, basically been retired for 5 years, and all the kids are gone, and was basically looking, the house is about a 2,600 square foot house. That's basement included. And we were just looking to create something that would allow for additional income, essentially. And talking to Jake, Mr. Young, he was giving me all the options, and I referenced the Utah League of City and Towns in regards to the ruling that took place, of the law that passed in 2021, I believe, in regards to the internal ADUs. Wife and I had considered, we're looking at all options, whether they were detached, attached, or internal. Initially, I was considering an attached because I have a breezeway that attaches a garage. Had considered building something above the garage and extending the garage a little bit. And then after Mr. Young told me all the rules that currently exist, then we started to consider the internal, because I have a basement that would be in the neighborhood of 950 square feet or something like that. And the requirements for that were owner occupied and all those kind of things, which we would obviously want to comply with as far as all the rules and regulations and building codes and stuff that were necessary to accommodate such a dwelling. So that was basically my interest, and he was very helpful, and hopefully something can happen with it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Lance.
Just real quick, Jake, I know in working in other code and different things with the city and our building standards, I know our engineers have said we need to make sure we have all this stuff done, because the day will probably come if we don't, the state will say, okay, here's what you're going to do. It sounds like we are going to hear this again, but is this something that we didn't follow through on this? The state may come the day that the state says, oh, you don't have, well, here's what you will follow.
That's already come.
Okay, so it's all right.
already
I mean,
here.
it sounds like we're gonna hear this back, but that's one thing I've found, that if we don't take action, someone probably will for us. So it's good to look at this.
And I guess related to that, if we did nothing, would the state's code, which allows this, prevail? In other words, we can't, would it be illegal for us as a city to prohibit it if the state's allowing it? Or we just need to create the parameters, but we can't disallow it?
You cannot disallow it. It's already allowed by state code.
So we just need to figure out how to allow it within our jurisdiction.
Yes, and the state has given you rights, levers that you can pull for the internal ADU. And then
So it doesn't feel like this is a matter of should we or should we not take it up. It's our hands forced to some extent, and in a good way, because I think we all have interest in seeing something happen here. But but, you know, people can do it anyway. Essentially, it's the state allowed it. And we just have no parameters for it.
Correct. And so it is in the benefit of the city to best interest to do that. And then I would say at the same time, you consider the two other options.
That was a great question, Lance. And I think, you know, yeah, I'm excited. But, you know, the other thought is, you know, so the examples that were shown were an attached ADU or maybe an unattached ADU. I think, you know, there's other categories too, right? So, for you went to the rodeo, so you went to the Morgan County Fairgrounds. And a third category might be a mobile ADU. You have that little miniature house that is on display for the whole community to see. You know, something like that might be put at the back of someone's property for a period of time. I think all these things need to be considered as part of scope.
Yeah, a tiny home would, well, there's different types, but the difference between an ADU, some tiny homes are, you know, they're on wheels still, or it's not built on a foundation. And that's where it wouldn't be an ADU. That'd be something different.
What is it?
A tiny home. But I'm saying a tiny home can go both ways. Yeah, if it's not on a foundation, then you could say it's not a ADU. It'd be a mobile home.
So whether or not it has wheels?
Yes, foundation.
So, all right, what other discussion did you want on this? I'm cognizant that it's approaching 9:15.
Yeah.
Can I just make one other thing? Maybe that was it. I just think it'd be great to see examples from other cities that have got this in their code. So
I can send you some.
Okay, so we have something to go off and we're not just making stuff up.
And things that are in city codes are maximum size. Some go smaller, 800 square feet, some go 1,000, some don't limit the square foot size, the setbacks. Parking's a common one. You know, typically in the ADU, there's actually been a lot of research on ADUs. Typically, it's a small household. It's a single person, or it's two people or a couple, sometimes children, rarely more than one child. And so that's where you require maybe one parking stall or maybe two. Homes already come typically with the garage with hopefully, you know, two in there and a driveway with two. So typically it's not too hard to get that. But you can require that and off-street, you know, parking. Yeah, yes, you can require that.
Yeah. Right.
So thank you. Great discussion.
Building heights.
I want to wrap up at this
Yes,
point,
okay.
primarily because these will be the kinds of details to, you know, what Councilman London shared is we have to think through all of that. And I think there's some excitement to do that. I do hope this comes back ultimately, but at this point, I think we've weighed in. Any final comments after Ray will let Ray finish up?
Chris, a message out that we have a joint meeting next Tuesday with the planning commission and city council. That's still, you want to still in that joint or not? You want that joint then? So we're all invited next Tuesday.
Mixed residential. Yeah, it's not mixing uses, it's mixing residential. So a zone where you could have single family and townhomes together.
Okay.
Reason why is we can get staff, and we want you to see what also that's your prepared, but if we do ask you to come and start working on that, you have an idea of what was presented.
And that came about from the meeting that we had here with the NICE on that townhome project. So kudos to the planning commission for highly encouraging something new.
We're the best. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. And we will come next Tuesday to that joint session. That being said, we made it through our agenda items tonight, and this meeting is now adjourned.